It was a crisp autumn evening in Los Angeles, the kind of night that made the city's skyline glow with an almost surreal brilliance. Elon Musk, the tech mogul who had changed the world more times than most people could count, was at yet another high-profile charity gala. He had attended so many of these events over the years that it had become routine. A sea of flashing cameras, reporters trying to get a quote, and well-dressed philanthropists discussing the next big idea to save humanity. But tonight, something felt different. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? As he made his way through the crowd, shaking hands with industry giants and talking to young innovators, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that he was disconnected. For all the advancements he had made, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, there was a lingering emptiness, a gnawing question in the back of his mind. Why was he doing all of this? Was it for fame, fortune, or something more profound? As he turned a corner, the crowd parted, and his eyes fell upon an elderly woman sitting by herself in a quiet corner. She was dressed in simple, worn clothing, a stark contrast to the opulence around her. Her eyes sparkled with an unusual clarity, eyes that had seen more than the average person could ever comprehend. She was holding a sign, not one for asking for money, but one that simply said, "Looking for hope." Something about her caught Elon's attention. Maybe it was her resilience, the way she didn't seem to be out of place, even in a room filled with millionaires. He paused for a moment, looking at her in a way that seemed to stop time. The woman, noticing him, smiled gently. "You're Elon Musk, aren't you?" she asked, her voice surprisingly calm. Elon, used to being recognized everywhere he went, nodded. "Yes, I am. How are you?" The woman's eyes softened, and she tilted her head slightly, as if considering something. Then, almost as if the thought had only just occurred to her, she asked, "Did God send you?" The question hung in the air like a weight, surprising Elon more than he cared to admit. He blinked, unsure of how to respond. Was it a joke? An odd comment from someone who didn't fully understand who he was? But there was something in her eyes, something deeper. She wasn't asking about his achievements, his technology, or his wealth. She was asking something far more fundamental. And for the first time in a long while, Elon was unsure of what to say. His mind raced. Did God send me? It was the kind of question he had never considered. He had always been driven by purpose, by vision, but never by something as intangible as divine purpose. His mind wandered back to his childhood, to the many hours he had spent reading about the great inventors and entrepreneurs who shaped the world. Were they sent by God, too? Or were they just people, driven by something else? Elon felt a strange weight in the air, and for the first time, the glimmering lights of the gala felt far away. He could hear the murmur of conversation from the crowd, the soft clink of glasses, but all of it seemed irrelevant now. The old woman's question had hit him harder than he expected. He stared at her for a long moment, his mind searching for the right words. For someone who was used to answering questions about Mars, AI, and sustainable energy, this simple, direct question felt like an existential puzzle. "Did God send you?" the woman repeated, her voice steady, as if she knew that the answer would be life-changing, not just for her, but for him as well. Elon took a deep breath. What did he believe? He wasn't sure anymore. He had spent his life focused on innovation, pushing the boundaries of technology, and trying to change the world in his own way. But was that enough? Was that all there was to his existence? To everyone's existence? "I don't know," he finally said, his voice softer than he expected. "I don't think God sent me, but maybe I'm here to do something that could help others. Maybe that's why I'm doing all of this." The old woman smiled, but it wasn't the smile of someone who had heard a simple answer. It was the kind of smile that reflected understanding, as though she knew exactly what he meant. "You're doing more than you realize," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "We all have our purpose, and sometimes it's not about us. It's about what we leave behind." Elon stood there for a moment, feeling a strange shift within himself. It's about what we leave behind. Before he could say anything more, the woman nodded as if satisfied with their brief conversation. "Thank you for your time," she said, her voice warm and comforting. Elon hesitated, then nodded, feeling a sense of awe that he couldn't quite explain. He looked at the old woman one last time before turning to walk away, but as he did, he couldn't help but feel that something had just changed in him. Her question, so simple yet so profound, had left an indelible mark. As Elon stepped out into the cool night air, his mind raced with the conversation. Did God send me? It echoed in his thoughts, like a question that would not go away. He had always been the one asking the big questions, about space, about energy, about the future. But today, for the first time in a long while, someone had asked him a question that made him stop and wonder. Maybe there's more to this journey than just technology. The gala continued behind him, but Elon wasn't focused on the glitz and glamour anymore. As he made his way to the exit, he felt the weight of the question lingering in his mind. And deep down, he realized that the answer might not lie in the advancements he'd already made. It might lie in something much deeper, something he hadn't yet discovered. The night ended, but Elon couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the verge of something big. The question had sparked something in him, something he didn't fully understand yet. It was as if the old woman had given him a glimpse into a new purpose, a new direction, a direction he hadn't considered before. His phone buzzed with a new message, but he didn't even glance at it. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel the need to rush off to the next thing. Instead, he stood there, looking out into the night, wondering if he might be on the brink of a new kind of journey. As he stood there in the quiet of the evening, one thought kept coming back to him. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't all just about him. Elon Musk had always been a dreamer, even as a child. Raised in Pretoria, South Africa, by a father who was tough, demanding, and often distant, Elon quickly learned that the world wasn't going to give him anything. He had to take it. His mother, May Musk, was the other half of his foundation, a model and dietitian who taught him the value of persistence and self-reliance. She was kind and encouraging, and though her career was challenging, she never let Elon see her break under pressure. From a young age, Elon was obsessed with the idea of pushing boundaries. He was an avid reader, devouring books on everything from physics to science fiction, and by the time he was 12, he had taught himself to code. His first entrepreneurial venture was a video game he created, Blaster, which he sold for around $500. It wasn't much, but it was the spark that ignited a fire in him. He realized that technology could be a vehicle for changing the world, and he could drive it. But growing up in South Africa wasn't easy. Elon's father, Errol, was a brilliant but volatile man whose harshness often overshadowed his brilliance. Elon grew up feeling torn between wanting to earn his father's approval and questioning whether it was worth the cost to his own sense of self. His parents divorced when he was young, and while his mother remained a constant source of love and encouragement, his father's absence weighed heavily on him. Elon had always been ambitious, even as a teenager. He wanted more. He wanted to break free from the small world of Pretoria and explore the limitless possibilities that lay beyond. So, at 17, he left for Canada, enrolling at Queen's University in Ontario. His plan was to eventually transfer to the University of Pennsylvania, but the move wasn't without its challenges. Canada was a new world, one that offered more freedom, more opportunities, and a path that seemed to be in line with his ambitions. But even in the vastness of a new country, Elon still carried with him the weight of his upbringing. The pain of wanting a father's approval, the uncertainty of not always knowing whether he was on the right path, it haunted him, even as he took his first steps toward changing the world. It was at the University of Pennsylvania, where Elon studied physics and economics, that he started formulating the ideas that would eventually shape his career. While many of his peers were content to follow traditional career paths, Elon began to question the status quo. Why were humans so reliant on fossil fuels? Why hadn't space exploration advanced faster? And most importantly, what could he do to accelerate change? In 1995, after dropping out of a PhD program at Stanford University after just 2 days, Elon moved to Silicon Valley. With just $28,000 in his pocket and a burning desire to make a difference, he founded Zip2, a company that provided business directories and maps for newspapers. It wasn't a glamorous start, but it was his start. Zip2 was eventually sold for nearly $300 million, and Elon's next steps led him to X.com, which later became PayPal. an online payment company that would eventually sell for $1.5 billion. But despite his financial success, Elon always felt a deeper calling, one that wasn't tied to money or fame. In the years that followed, he poured his energy into ventures that aligned with his passion for making the world a better place. Tesla Motors, SpaceX, Solar City, and Neuralink. These ventures weren't just business opportunities. They were his life's work. Tesla, a company that aimed to revolutionize electric vehicles, had become his most personal project. Elon poured himself into it, often working 100-hour weeks, sacrificing personal relationships and even his own health. There were moments when it seemed like the company might fail, when the electric car market was far from ready, when Tesla's financial outlook looked bleak. But Elon never gave up. For him, this wasn't just about building a car company. It was about changing the way humanity approached energy and transportation. He was convinced that sustainable energy was the future, and Tesla would lead the way. SpaceX, on the other hand, had become a symbol of his obsession with humanity's future beyond Earth. He wasn't just creating rockets. He was working towards something much grander, a multi-planetary civilization. In his mind, the survival of humanity depended on humanity's ability to expand beyond Earth. SpaceX's mission wasn't just about getting to Mars. It was about ensuring that humanity had a backup plan in case things went wrong here on Earth. Through it all, Elon had kept pushing, constantly questioning, constantly innovating. But what he had never fully explored was the deeper purpose behind all his work. Was he simply driven by ambition? Or was there something more? Now, sitting in his office after the gala, Elon couldn't stop thinking about the old woman's question. Did God send you? He leaned back in his chair, staring out of the large glass windows of his office, which overlooked the sprawling city below. Had God sent him? Was that the right question to ask himself? After years of building companies, launching rockets, and working toward a future beyond Earth, Elon had never considered his work in a spiritual light. But maybe it was time. As the night wore on, his thoughts kept returning to her. What had made her ask that question? Did she see something in him that even he didn't? He'd met countless people throughout his life, many who praised him for his achievements. But the old woman wasn't interested in his achievements. She wanted to know if he was on a mission greater than himself. She was asking him to reflect on his purpose, not just his success. Elon had always been driven by a desire to make an impact. But now, as he thought more about it, he began to wonder if there was a deeper calling that had shaped his life in ways he hadn't fully understood until now. Could his work really be about something more? Could it be about helping people in ways that went beyond the technologies he created? His phone buzzed on the desk, snapping him out of his thoughts. He glanced at it, but didn't pick it up. Instead, he stood and walked to the window, looking out at the dark expanse of the city below. He had changed the world in so many ways, but had he ever truly stopped to ask why? For the first time, he wasn't sure of the answer, and it made him feel vulnerable. The days after the charity gala were a whirlwind for Elon. There were meetings with Tesla engineers about the next-generation electric vehicle, discussions with SpaceX scientists about Mars colonization, and boardroom negotiations that seemed to consume all his energy. Yet, no matter how many projects he had to juggle, the question the old woman had asked him continued to echo in the back of his mind. Did God send you? At first, Elon tried to dismiss it as just another odd encounter, one of those fleeting moments with a stranger that didn't really matter. After all, he was Elon Musk. He was busy with groundbreaking companies, shaping the future of humanity. He didn't have time to entertain existential questions about divine purpose. But the question lingered. It wasn't just her words, it was the way she said it, the sincerity in her voice, the depth in her eyes. It made him feel as if he had been underestimating something crucial all along. Elon had always viewed his work as an intellectual pursuit, a drive for innovation, and a way to solve big problems. He had always believed that the world's future rested in his hands. But that night, for the first time, the purpose of it all seemed unclear. It was a late evening when Elon found himself in a familiar spot, his office at Tesla, staring at a wall of screens displaying real-time data from every corner of the company. He had just come from a meeting with the Tesla board, where the pressure to produce more electric vehicles, faster, had reached new heights. The company was burning through cash, and despite the advances in battery technology, the world still seemed unready to fully embrace electric cars. He knew that if Tesla didn't meet its goals soon, it could all come crashing down. Elon ran his fingers through his hair and sighed. The same thought crossed his mind again. Is this all for nothing? His mind wandered back to his early days with Tesla. He had been so optimistic, so driven by a clear vision of the future. Clean, sustainable energy, a world where electric cars weren't just a luxury but the standard. And yet, after years of relentless work, there were still so many obstacles. The automotive industry was still dominated by fossil fuels. People were still hesitant to buy electric cars. The whole world seemed to move at a pace that was too slow for him. Am I the right person to lead this? He thought. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Come in, Elon said, turning to see his head of communications, Sarah. Step inside. Elon, I've got the latest numbers on the Model 3 production line, Sarah said, holding a tablet. We've made some headway, but we're still behind schedule. The pressure's mounting from investors to hit these deadlines. Elon nodded absently, glancing at the numbers on the screen. The pressure was always there, always building. Tesla's stock had fluctuated wildly over the years, and it was only his relentless commitment to the mission that had kept the company alive through the darkest times. Yet, even with the technological breakthroughs, the real-world applications often felt like a battle uphill. What are we missing? Elon asked, his mind still partially focused on the old woman's question. Sarah paused for a moment, sensing something different in his demeanor. I think it's the larger vision, Elon. The world needs to see why this is so important, not just the cars, but the entire mission. We're not just selling vehicles, we're selling a future. People need to believe in that future. Her words hit him with an unexpected clarity. He had spent so much time focusing on the mechanics, on pushing his engineers and teams harder and faster, that he had lost sight of the larger picture. Was Tesla about the cars? Or was it about something more? Something greater? Something that connected to humanity's future? Maybe we're not doing enough to show the world why this matters beyond just electric cars, Elon said quietly, more to himself than to Sarah. Sarah nodded. Exactly. People want to see the bigger story. They want to know that they're part of something. They want to believe that it's not just about profits or technology, but about saving the planet. About leaving something for the next generation. Elon turned toward the window, looking out over the Tesla headquarters. He had always believed in his vision, but now, that vision seemed more fragile than ever. It wasn't just about innovation anymore, it was about hope. The same kind of hope the old woman had asked him about. Over the next few days, Elon found himself questioning more and more. He thought about the larger impact of his work. Space exploration, renewable energy, electric cars. They were all pieces of the same puzzle, but what was the bigger picture? What was the core of everything he was doing? It wasn't the technology, he realized. It wasn't the cars, or even the rockets, or the solar panels. It was the belief that humanity could rise above its problems. It was the belief that we could save the Earth, that we could reach beyond it, and that we could leave a better world behind. But he still wasn't sure if that was enough. At the same time, the pressure at Tesla and SpaceX continued to build. Tesla's stock was unpredictable, and SpaceX faced its own set of challenges. The Mars mission was still years away, and while SpaceX had successfully landed rockets, the financial strain of advancing space exploration was massive. Elon had invested nearly every dollar he had into both companies, and there were times when the future seemed uncertain. The media, the investors, and even some of his closest associates began to question his strategy. Was he spreading himself too thin? Was he chasing impossible dreams? And then, the personal toll began to show. Elon's relationships with his family and friends had always been strained, but now, even those closest to him were starting to ask hard questions. He had sacrificed so much. His time, his health, his personal life, for the sake of his companies. But was it all worth it? At a family dinner one evening, his brother Kimball sat across from him, watching him carefully. Elon, Kimball began, his tone a mixture of concern and frustration. You can't keep doing this. You're burning yourself out. You're always focused on the next thing, the next big idea. But what about you? What about the people around you? Elon shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had always known that his obsession with his work had cost him relationships, but now it felt more real than ever. What about me? He had never asked himself that question before. You've been so focused on saving the world, Kimball continued, that you've forgotten to take care of yourself? Maybe you should take a step back. Maybe you need to find balance. If you're going to change the world, you need to be okay first. Elon looked at his brother, feeling the weight of the words. For the first time in years, he began to consider the possibility that he might have been wrong in thinking that his work could be his entire identity. What was all this for, if I can't even take care of myself? He wondered. The conflict inside Elon deepened. As much as he wanted to push forward, as much as he believed in his mission, he couldn't ignore the growing feeling that something had to change. Maybe he was chasing a dream that wasn't just about technology or profit. Maybe there was a bigger reason for his success, and that reason had to be tied to more than just the next big thing. He thought back to the old woman. Her question had started something, and now he needed to find the answer. The next few weeks were a blur for Elon. The pressure from investors, the constant demands of his companies, and his internal struggle to understand his purpose were weighing on him like never before. He couldn't shake the thought that he was missing something crucial, something he had been blind to while obsessively chasing after technological advancements and world-changing innovations. What if his real purpose wasn't just to push the boundaries of technology, but to inspire something deeper in others, something spiritual, something that transcended even the brightest rockets and the most efficient electric cars? It was at this point, in the midst of his growing internal conflict, that an unexpected opportunity came his way. A chance that would force him to confront both his past and his future. Elon was sitting in his office late one evening, poring over designs for the next SpaceX launch, when he received a call from an old friend, Richard Branson, the flamboyant founder of Virgin Group. Elon, Richard's voice crackled over the phone. I've been thinking. It's time for us to take the next step. I'm talking about taking humanity to space, together. Elon's eyebrows furrowed. What do you mean, Richard? I'm proposing a joint venture. You know, Virgin Galactic has been focused on suborbital flights for tourists. But you and I, we both know we have the potential to take this further. Much further. I'm talking about collaboration on Mars. Think about it. Our companies working together, pushing humanity to the stars. The offer was audacious, just the kind of challenge Elon had come to expect from Branson. But as soon as Richard mentioned Mars, something clicked inside Elon. The idea of joining forces with another visionary like Branson, someone who had never backed down from an audacious challenge, seemed almost inevitable. The world was watching SpaceX's every move, and collaborating with another high-profile figure in the space race would mean accelerating human progress in a way that could make even more of a statement to the world. It was the kind of partnership that could change everything. Let's talk details, Elon said after a long pause. Over the next few days, Elon and Richard exchanged ideas. The plan wasn't just about expanding SpaceX's capabilities, it was about changing the way the world thought about space exploration. They would merge their efforts, share resources, and push for Mars colonization faster than ever before. With the combined weight of their companies, they could make the dream of interplanetary travel a reality much sooner than anyone imagined. But as Elon dove into the planning, he couldn't help but feel an unsettling sense of urgency. Mars was the long-term goal, sure, but the reality was, humanity was facing serious challenges right here on Earth. Climate change, resource depletion, and political instability were spiraling out of control. Could he really focus so heavily on space exploration when the planet needed help now? The same questions, the same doubts that had been plaguing him for weeks resurfaced. Is this the right path? Am I doing enough for Earth, for humanity? He was determined to be the one who helped create a better future, but was he letting his ambition blind him to the more immediate needs of the world? Elon decided he needed to take a break. He had to step away from the day-to-day of the companies and allow himself the space to think clearly. It was a rare decision, one that spoke volumes about how far he had come in confronting the emotional turmoil inside him. In the weeks that followed, he decided to spend time at his cabin in the hills outside Los Angeles, a quiet place he rarely visited, filled with personal mementos from his past. He'd come here to think, to clear his mind, to find some sense of direction. But as he sat there, staring at the vast landscape in front of him, it felt as if he were walking into the unknown. The stars above him seemed almost too bright, too close. It was a reminder of the vastness of the universe, of his own smallness in the grand scheme of things. In that moment, he realized that his focus on the future had made him lose sight of the present. It was there, under the endless sky, that Elon began to ask himself the most difficult question of all. What is my true purpose? Was it enough to just change the world through technology? Was it enough to make a difference in the future if he wasn't leaving a legacy in the present? Was his role really about being the visionary behind Earth's salvation? Or was it something deeper, something that had been with him all along, waiting to be discovered? In those quiet moments, Elon's thoughts went back to the old woman. He could almost hear her voice. Did God send you? Days passed, and Elon's internal conflict reached a boiling point. He returned to Tesla, to SpaceX, to the whirlwind of meetings and deadlines. But now, he was different. He had spent enough time alone with his thoughts, enough time questioning his motives and actions. He had to face something that terrified him, that his drive, his relentless pursuit of the future, might have come at a cost to his personal well-being, to his relationships, and perhaps even to his sense of self. And then, as if fate had a way of pushing him forward, another conversation came. One that would give him the clarity he desperately needed. Elon was at a SpaceX launch site when he ran into Gwynne Shotwell, the president and COO of SpaceX, who had been with him through thick and thin. She was a fierce leader, one of the few people who truly understood Elon's vision, and he respected her more than most. "I can see it in your eyes, Elon," Gwynne said, her tone soft but direct. "You're struggling with something. You've been pushing hard for so long, and now you're asking the big questions." "I know that look. I've seen it before." Elon hesitated. Gwynne was right. He had been struggling. The weight of his ambition, the responsibility to his companies, and the uncertainty about his purpose had been pulling him in different directions. But how could he put all of it into words? "Maybe I've been chasing the wrong thing," Elon confessed, his voice surprisingly vulnerable. "Maybe I've been so focused on changing the future, on building technology and advancing space travel, that I've missed something crucial. I'm not sure if I'm doing it for the right reasons anymore, or if the reasons I'm doing it for are enough." Gwynne listened carefully, understanding his internal battle. "Elon, I know you. I know how hard you work. You're not just trying to build the future, you're trying to leave something meaningful. But sometimes, the best way to do that is by being grounded in the present. Your mission, your purpose, it can't just be about the next step. It has to be about what's real now, about people, about connection." Elon's mind raced. Gwynne's words echoed the realization he had been circling for weeks. It wasn't just about technological progress or the vision of Mars. It was about the impact he had here, today, on the people who worked with him, on the planet that needed him, on the generations to come. With a newfound sense of clarity, Elon made a decision. The road ahead would be challenging. The mission to Mars was still a long-term goal, and Tesla's work on sustainable energy was far from complete. But now, he understood something deeper. His mission was never just about solving problems. It was about inspiring hope. It was about showing humanity that, despite all the obstacles, we could rise above them. He wasn't just building electric cars or rockets. He was building a future where people could believe again. And in that moment, Elon Musk knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be. A few days after his conversation with Gwynne, something inside Elon began to shift. The weight that had been hanging over him for weeks, months even, started to lighten, just a little. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic revelation, but more of a quiet, internal recalibration. He'd spent so long striving for the future, so long looking to the stars, that he had forgotten to live fully in the present. The old woman's question kept haunting him, but now, in the midst of all the noise and the pressure, he started to hear it differently. Did God send you? It wasn't just a question about his work or his accomplishments. It was a question about his purpose, his soul's purpose. What if his true calling wasn't to be a billionaire entrepreneur or a space pioneer, but to serve something higher, something greater than even his own dreams? Elon had always been the kind of person who focused on solving problems. Technical problems, business problems, societal problems. But now, he couldn't ignore the fact that there was something deeper at play. What if the real problem he was meant to solve wasn't a technological one? What if it was a spiritual one? That night, after a long day of meetings, he stood in his Tesla office, gazing out of the windows at the bright lights of the city. Everything he had built, everything he had fought for, had brought him to this moment. But now, as he watched the world from above, it felt empty. There was something missing. A connection, a purpose. The phone on his desk buzzed. It was a text from his mother, May Musk. "I've been thinking about you. Are you okay? I know you're working hard, but don't forget to take care of yourself." He smiled softly at the message. His mother had always been a grounding force in his life, the one person who had never let him get too caught up in his own head. He typed a quick response. "Thanks, Mom. I think I'm starting to understand something important, but it's been a journey." He put the phone down, still staring out at the world below him. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to sit in silence, not thinking about rockets or electric vehicles or solar grids. Just being. It was a small thing, but it felt like a breakthrough. The next morning, Elon boarded a plane bound for Cape Canaveral, Florida, to oversee a SpaceX launch. As he sat in his seat, he reflected on how far he had come. The journey to this moment had been long and fraught with obstacles, yet somehow, he had managed to stay focused. At times, he had felt invincible, like nothing could stand in his way. But now, he understood that invincibility wasn't the answer. It was vulnerability that made a person strong. The ability to look inward, to ask difficult questions, and to change course when needed. He had been so focused on being the person who changed the world, but maybe he needed to become the person who could truly see it. As the plane touched down in Florida, Elon's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Kimball. "How are you doing? Have you figured it out yet?" Elon didn't reply immediately. Instead, he sat back in his seat, looking out the window as the plane taxied toward the gate. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the rush of anxiety or the need to fix something. He didn't need to come up with a grand answer. He just needed to be. He didn't need to solve the world's problems all at once. He needed to live in the world, to experience it fully, and to understand it on a deeper level. When Elon stepped off the plane and into the warm Florida air, it felt like a new beginning. The next chapter of his life was about to unfold, not because of the technologies he would create, but because of the person he was becoming. He felt the weight of his past struggles, his successes, and his failures, all coming together in this single moment. He realized that, no matter what happened next, it was okay. He didn't have to have all the answers. He just had to keep moving forward. At the launch site, the excitement was palpable. The SpaceX team had been working around the clock to prepare for this moment, the launch of another Falcon Heavy rocket, which would carry a communications satellite into orbit. The countdown clock ticked away, and Elon stood with Gwyn, watching the final stages of preparation unfold before them. The energy in the air was electric. He could feel the pulse of the rocket's impending launch, the hope and anticipation that came with every mission. Space exploration was still risky, still uncertain, but it was moving forward. As the countdown hit 0, the rocket soared into the sky, leaving a trail of fire and smoke behind it. Elon stood still, watching, his heart racing with a sense of awe. It wasn't just the rocket's power that moved him. It was the realization that he had been part of something extraordinary, something that wasn't just about technology or business, but about humanity's future. He had built something that had the potential to change the course of history. And yet, for all his success, something told him that his most important work was still ahead. As the rocket disappeared into the sky, Elon felt a tear slip down his cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness, but of wonder. For the first time in years, he felt connected to the stars, to the planet, and to the people who had supported him along the way. Gwyn turned to him, noticing the emotion in his eyes. "You're thinking about it, aren't you?" Elon nodded slowly. "Yeah, I am. What's going through your mind?" He looked out at the sky, his gaze softening. "Maybe I've been looking at everything all wrong. It's not just about reaching Mars. It's about making sure we don't lose sight of what we have here. It's about building a future that's sustainable, not just on Mars, but on Earth. We have to remember that. Gwen smiled. That's the Elon I know. Later that evening, as Elon sat alone in his hotel room, he picked up his phone again and typed a message to Kimball. I think I figured it out. It's not about being a hero or about saving the world. It's about connecting people to something greater than themselves. And that's what I want to do. I want to help people believe again, believe in each other, in the future, in the possibilities we can create together. He hit send and sat back on the bed, feeling a sense of calm wash over him. He wasn't sure what the next steps would look like, or where his journey would take him, but for the first time in a long while, he felt at peace with the path ahead. For the first time, Elon Musk understood that the true power of his work wasn't just in what he created. It was in how it inspired others. The real impact wasn't in technology, but in the belief that humanity could achieve the impossible. And that, for him, was enough. As the night deepened and the world outside quieted, Elon drifted off to sleep, knowing that the answer to the old woman's question wasn't something he could have anticipated. He wasn't sent to change the world through force or ambition. He was sent to show humanity that change was possible, not because of the technology he built, but because of the hope he sparked. And that, he knew, was just the beginning. The next few months were nothing short of transformative for Elon. The clarity he had felt that night in Florida began to permeate his actions, his decisions, and even his interactions with others. He wasn't entirely sure when the shift occurred. Perhaps it had been gradual, or perhaps it had been a singular moment of realization that simply took time to manifest. But what was certain was that he was now driven by a deeper sense of purpose than ever before. Gone were the restless, sleepless nights spent obsessing over technical details or pushing for faster breakthroughs. Instead, his focus began to shift toward the bigger picture. How could he use his platform, his companies, and his resources to inspire change rather than just facilitate it? How could he build a future not only through technology, but through human connection? The questions that had once seemed like existential burdens now felt like the keys to unlocking a more profound mission. It was during a routine meeting at Tesla headquarters that Elon's transformation began to take a concrete form. He was in a conference room with the engineering team, discussing advancements in battery technology when he paused, staring out of the large windows at the bustling city below. The noise, the chaos, it all felt so far removed from the vision he now held in his mind. He realized that while all of these advancements were important, there was something more urgent calling him forward. I think we're missing something, he said, breaking the silence. The team turned toward him, puzzled. Elon rarely spoke without a clear objective, and his pauses often meant he was working through a complex thought. I've been thinking a lot about the future, about the world we're creating, Elon continued, his voice thoughtful. It's not just about electric cars. It's not just about rockets or satellites. It's about the world we're leaving behind for future generations. We can make things more sustainable, yes, but what we're also doing is creating hope. We're showing people that the future doesn't have to be a place of despair. It can be a place of possibility. One of the engineers, Dave, nodded slowly. You're talking about more than just product development, aren't you? Elon smiled faintly. Yes, I think it's time we shift our focus. Instead of simply pushing for technological breakthroughs, we need to make sure we're also building a future that people feel they can belong to. A future that inspires people to believe in what's possible, not just what's probable. Gwen Shotwell, who had been sitting in the back of the room, spoke up. What's the next step, Elon? He turned to her, his eyes filled with a renewed sense of purpose. We start by leading with purpose, not just profits. We make sure that every decision we make, every innovation we bring to life, is tied to something bigger than just business. We need to focus on how our work can unite people, give them hope, and show them that the future can be better than they imagined. Elon's words hit the team like a wave of energy. They had always known that his ambition was boundless, that he could reach for the stars and beyond. But this was something different. This was about a collective mission, and it resonated with them. In the following weeks, they made changes to the company's direction. They didn't abandon their core mission of advancing sustainable energy and space exploration, but they started looking for ways to frame those goals through the lens of hope and inspiration. For Tesla, This meant more focus on not just creating electric cars, but creating a world where electric vehicles were the norm. Not because they were better, but because they were part of a global movement toward a healthier, more sustainable planet. For SpaceX, it wasn't just about launching rockets. It was about showing humanity that there was still room for wonder, for exploration, for pushing the boundaries of what was possible. The changes were subtle at first, but they began to ripple outward. People noticed. Customers noticed. Even investors took a pause, seeing the subtle shift in Elon's rhetoric and the way his companies were framing their missions. It wasn't just about creating groundbreaking technology. It was about creating a future that people could feel a part of, a future they could look toward with optimism. But not everyone was immediately on board with this new direction. While many in Elon's inner circle embraced the shift, there were still those who saw the world in terms of numbers and balance sheets. Profit margins, quarterly earnings, and market share still mattered to them. And truth be told, it mattered to Elon too. But now, he knew it was more than that. There was something bigger than profits, bigger than technological breakthroughs. There was the question of legacy. How did he want to be remembered? One particularly tense meeting with the board members of Tesla revealed the undercurrents of disagreement. They weren't sure about Elon's renewed focus on purpose over profit. One of the investors, a sharp, no-nonsense man named Brad, raised his hand. "Elon," he began, his tone measured, "I get it. We all want to change the world. But there's no denying that Tesla is, at its core, a business. And if we lose sight of that, we risk not just failing our shareholders, but losing our edge in the marketplace. This hope and inspiration stuff, great in theory, but we need to stick to the facts. Our products need to sell." Elon leaned forward, his expression calm but firm. "Brad, I understand your concern. But if we only focus on the short-term gains, we lose sight of what we're really trying to do here. Technology can only take us so far. What really drives change, what will make people rally behind us, is the vision we offer, the hope we create." Brad opened his mouth to respond, but Elon cut him off, his voice taking on a quiet intensity. "This isn't just about building products that make money. This is about building a world people want to live in. I know it's a risk, and I know it won't always be easy, but this is the direction we're going. You can either be a part of it, or you can watch from the sidelines." The room was silent. Brad shifted in his chair, clearly rattled by Elon's unwavering conviction. "I'm not going to apologize for this," Elon continued. "I'm not going to back down from what I believe in." Gwyn, who had been silently observing, finally spoke up. "Elon's right. We've never been about playing it safe. We've always gone against the grain, and we've made it work. Let's take the risk together." For a moment, the room hung in the balance. Then, one by one, the other board members nodded. They may not have all been on the same page, but they knew Elon was the driving force behind Tesla, and if he was committed to this vision, they would have to follow. The meeting ended with a sense of resolution. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but it was clear. Elon had never been one to play it safe, and this was no exception. He was moving forward with a renewed sense of purpose, not just to create world-changing technology, but to create a world where people could see a brighter future for themselves. It was, after all, what the old woman had asked him. Did God send you? Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't about the space missions, or the electric cars, or the technology he could create. Maybe it was about the hope he could inspire. Maybe that was the true purpose behind it all. And as Elon stood there, watching the sunrise over the horizon, he knew that this was only the beginning. Elon's phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him from his thoughts. He picked it up to see a message from Gwyn, sent just moments ago. "We need to talk. It's time to bring in the big guns for the next phase of our mission. Are you ready?" Elon smiled to himself, his heart filling with a renewed sense of excitement. It had been weeks since their conversation in the conference room, and the energy around Tesla, SpaceX, and his entire team had been building steadily. The company's new vision had been rolling out in subtle yet powerful ways, and now it was time to take it to the next level. Elon had a deep sense that everything was lining up for something much bigger than what he had originally envisioned. He texted back, "Let's do it. I'm all in." In the days that followed, Elon threw himself into crafting the next phase of his vision. He knew that in order to truly push the boundaries of human potential, he needed to focus on something even greater than technology. He needed to bring together a coalition of people, a collective force, to not only develop new ideas but to inspire and ignite a shared vision for the future. He had learned over the years that individual brilliance was essential, but the real power lay in collaboration. It was time to gather those who were not just pioneers in their respective fields, but those who shared his newfound passion for creating a better future. Gwyn had already begun reaching out to a diverse set of people. Visionary leaders, prominent scientists, influential philosophers, and environmentalists. People who had the power to change hearts and minds, not just with ideas, but with actions. Elon knew that it wasn't enough to build the technology or launch rockets. He needed to build a movement. Over the following weeks, the groundwork for this movement was laid. Assembling a mix of intellectuals, thinkers, and world changers, Elon and Gwyn began planning a global summit. The mission wasn't just to talk about the future. It was to challenge the world to see it differently, to see beyond the confines of technology, economy, and politics, to see the world not as it was, but as it could be. A world driven by hope, unity, and shared human potential. The summit was to be held in the heart of Silicon Valley, but Elon had no intention of keeping it limited to just tech elites. He wanted global thinkers, people from every corner of society, activists, artists, teachers, and even religious leaders. If humanity was going to solve its biggest challenges, it couldn't just be a select few people in positions of power. It needed to be everyone. Elon felt that the only way to spark this kind of global awakening was by stripping away the barriers that kept people apart. His goal wasn't just to unveil the next big technological breakthrough. No, this summit was about the human spirit, the universal drive for connection, understanding, and progress. The question that would guide them was simple. What if the future didn't have to be built alone? As the summit date grew nearer, Elon spent countless hours in meetings, collaborating with leaders from various fields. He was still the same Elon, focused, driven, and always looking to the next frontier. But now there was a new layer to his drive. He wasn't just looking to create new technologies or develop new solutions to the world's problems. He was looking to cultivate a new mindset, one that saw progress not just as a race to the finish line, but as a journey that had to be shared. But of course, not everyone shared his idealism. While most of his colleagues and allies were inspired by the new direction, there were still those who questioned whether this was the best use of resources. Some feared that focusing on such lofty, idealistic goals would distract from the realities of running companies like Tesla and SpaceX. One evening, after a long day of planning, Elon found himself alone in his office, staring out at the city lights. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Kimball, his brother. "Got a minute?" Elon motioned for him to come in, his face softening when he saw Kimball's concerned expression. Kimball had always been his closest confidant, the one person who could cut through the noise and ask the tough questions. "What's on your mind?" Elon asked. Kimball took a seat across from him. "I know you're excited about this summit, and I get the bigger picture you're trying to build, but are you sure we're not losing sight of the practical side of things?" Elon frowned, his mind racing. He hadn't been prepared for this kind of pushback. "What do you mean?" "I'm talking about the companies," Kimball replied. "You know how many people are relying on Tesla and SpaceX right now? The world needs those companies to succeed. There's a fine line between innovation and distraction. I don't want you to spread yourself too thin chasing a dream that might not happen as quickly as you think." Elon leaned back in his chair, contemplating his brother's words. Kimball was right in some ways. He had always been a big thinker, and sometimes that meant getting lost in the bigger picture at the cost of the immediate priorities. It wasn't always easy to balance the two, and Kimball was the kind of person who saw the risks where Elon could only see the potential. "I get it," Elon said slowly. "But what if this is the way to make the technologies more impactful? What if this summit can actually bring together the minds, the leaders, and the energy needed to take Tesla, SpaceX, and every other project to a whole new level?" Kimball sighed but nodded. "I want to believe in it too. I just don't want you to lose the foundation you've built. You've created something incredible with Tesla and SpaceX. You can't lose sight of that." Elon sat in silence for a long moment. Then he smiled, his mind made up. I won't. But it's not just about the companies anymore. It's about the movement we're starting. It's about making sure that everything we do, every product, every breakthrough, is part of a bigger vision. A vision that can inspire and change the world in ways we can't even imagine yet. Kimball studied him for a moment, then let out a deep breath. You always have big ideas, bro. I just don't want you to lose track of the ones that matter most. Elon nodded. I won't. Trust me. This is just the beginning. In the weeks leading up to the summit, everything fell into place. The media buzzed with anticipation, and the world seemed to be watching, waiting to see what Elon Musk's next move would be. Tesla's stock remained strong. SpaceX's launches continued to succeed. But now there was an undercurrent of something even more powerful, the idea that something greater than technology was at stake. It wasn't just about solving the world's problems. It was about changing the way people thought about the future. On the eve of the summit, Elon stood at the podium, overlooking the stage. The room was packed with some of the most brilliant minds in the world. But for the first time, Elon didn't feel the need to impress anyone. He didn't need to show off his achievements or tell them how successful his companies were. What mattered now was the message. Tomorrow, he would speak to the world about what he truly believed. That the future could be different, not because of one man, one company, or one technology, but because of all of us. It was a new kind of revolution, one built not on fear or competition, but on hope and collaboration. The air was electric as Elon stepped onto the stage, his gaze sweeping across the room filled with world leaders, thinkers, and innovators. The grand auditorium in the heart of Silicon Valley was alive with energy, the hum of excited conversation rising as attendees mingled and took their seats. The media buzz was palpable, with cameras flashing and reporters scrambling to get the first glimpse of what was to come. This summit was unlike anything the world had seen before. It wasn't just a gathering of the usual tech giants, venture capitalists, and CEOs. Elon had brought together a diverse array of people from all walks of life. Scientists, philosophers, environmentalists, activists, and even religious leaders, each united by a common cause, to change the way humanity viewed the future. As he stepped up to the microphone, a hush fell over the room. All eyes were on him. It was a moment he had imagined countless times, but nothing could have prepared him for the weight of it. This wasn't just about launching a new product or revealing the next big thing. This was about challenging the entire narrative of progress. He cleared his throat and began. Thank you all for being here today. We are living in an age of unprecedented change. Technology is advancing at a pace we could hardly have imagined even a decade ago. But with all this progress, we find ourselves at a crossroads. The world is changing rapidly, but are we? Are we ready to confront the challenges ahead, not just with new inventions, but with new ways of thinking? There was a brief pause as the audience absorbed his words. Elon could feel the weight of the room, the collective anticipation of what he would say next. This wasn't just a speech, it was a call to action. We've spent centuries building walls between us, whether it's through politics, religion, or economics. We've divided ourselves in ways that have held us back. But I believe we are at the point in history where we can choose a different path. A path of collaboration, of unity, and of shared hope. He paused, letting his words sink in. The world is facing monumental challenges: climate change, inequality, resource depletion, and political instability, to name a few. But these challenges are not insurmountable. I truly believe that if we come together, if we focus on solutions instead of problems, we can create a future that is not only sustainable, but one that is driven by optimism, creativity, and compassion. The room was silent now, and Elon could feel the shift. It wasn't just the weight of his words that had captured their attention. It was the sincerity behind them. The audience, many of whom were familiar with Elon's reputation as a visionary and risk-taker, was hearing something new today. The call for a collective vision, not just individual achievement. We are not here today to showcase the latest tech or to pitch the next big investment opportunity, Elon continued, his voice gaining strength. We are here to change the conversation. We are here to redefine what progress means, to put the health of our planet, the well-being of our communities, and the spirit of humanity at the forefront of our endeavors. As Elon spoke, the attendees began to shift in their seats, nodding in agreement. There was an undeniable sense that something momentous was happening here. For some, it was a revelation. For others, it was a reaffirmation of what they had always believed. That the future wasn't something that happened to us. It was something we could create together. Gwen, sitting in the front row, exchanged a look with Dave, one of the senior engineers from Tesla. She could see the change in their faces. There was a spark in their eyes, a shared understanding that this summit was more than just a platform for discussion. It was the beginning of something much larger. After his speech, Elon stepped off the stage and moved into a smaller, private meeting room. The conversations had already started. Groups of people were talking animatedly, exchanging ideas and forming connections. But the real work, the true transformation, was just beginning. As the day unfolded, the summit took on a life of its own. Breakout sessions were held, where participants dove deep into topics ranging from sustainable energy to global governance. Discussions were passionate, with some heated debates, but overall, the atmosphere was one of collaboration and shared purpose. Elon floated from one conversation to another, absorbing ideas, offering insights, and feeling the collective energy of the room. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. As the day wore on, there were moments of tension, particularly when the conversation turned to the role of big corporations in solving the world's problems. Some activists were quick to criticize the very entities that Elon had built his empire upon, accusing them of contributing to the environmental destruction and inequality they were now trying to solve. Elon had anticipated this pushback. He'd heard it before, from critics who saw his wealth and his companies as symbols of the very system they sought to dismantle. But instead of backing down, he embraced the challenge. "You're right," he said during one panel discussion, addressing a prominent environmentalist who had raised concerns about corporate greed. "The system is broken, but we have an opportunity here to change it. The companies we've built, the technologies we're developing, they can be the catalyst for this change. If we use our resources wisely, if we lead with purpose, we can create a new model for capitalism, one that serves people, not just profits." The room was quiet for a moment, and then, slowly, people began to nod in agreement. Elon's words had struck a chord. It wasn't just about creating solutions. It was about creating a new system that worked for everyone. A system where business success was measured not just by revenue, but by the impact it had on the world. That evening, after the official events had concluded, Elon found himself standing alone on the balcony of the summit venue, overlooking the city below. The sunset painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, and for a moment, everything felt still. He had always been someone who thrived on the next big challenge, the next big idea. But tonight, as he looked out over the sprawling city, he felt something different. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not from the success of the summit or the accolades he had received, but from something much more profound, the sense that he was finally on the right path. This wasn't just about technology or space exploration. It wasn't even just about his companies. It was about the bigger picture, the future he wanted to leave behind for humanity. And in that moment, he realized that this was just the beginning. The true work would come in the months and years ahead. The ideas that had been shared at this summit, the relationships that had been forged, would spark a new era of innovation and collaboration. But it was up to him, and all of those who had gathered here, to carry the torch forward. As the summit came to a close, Elon felt a surge of hope. There was a fire burning inside him, a fire that had been lit by the words of that old woman, by his own realization that he had been sent here for something far greater than himself. The next chapter in his journey was just beginning, and it was a journey that would require not just technology, but heart, unity, and vision. The months following the summit were nothing short of transformative. What had started as a grand vision, shared in a conference room full of the world's brightest minds, had quickly grown into a global movement. The summit had sparked something deep within people, a collective awareness that progress could no longer be defined solely by technological innovation or corporate success. It had to be measured by the impact on humanity and the planet. Elon felt a fire burning within him, not just to keep pushing the boundaries of what was possible, but to do it with a new sense of responsibility. He had always been driven by the desire to change the world, but now there was a profound shift in his approach. It wasn't just about getting to Mars or building electric cars. It was about how all of it fit together in the grander vision of a better world. The technologies could only be the means to an end. The end was a society that truly worked for everyone. He spent weeks meeting with his teams, pushing them to think bigger, to integrate sustainability, ethics, and social responsibility into every part of their projects. The teams at Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and the Boring Company were all on board, but it wasn't just about corporate culture. This new mission had to be global. One crisp morning, Elon walked into a newly renovated building in downtown Los Angeles, which had been transformed into a global innovation hub. It was here that his next big idea was about to take shape: the Global Sustainability Initiative, a joint venture between tech companies, governments, nonprofits, and grassroots organizations. The goal was simple: to unite the world in the fight against climate change, inequality, and environmental degradation. Inside, Gwen, Dave, and a group of environmental activists, economists, and thinkers gathered around a large conference table. The energy in the room was palpable. Everyone knew that this meeting could alter the course of history. "Elon, we've put together a draft of the plan," Gwen said, her voice steady but full of anticipation. She handed him a sleek, digital tablet showing a roadmap for the initiative. Elon glanced over the document, his eyes scanning the words. "This looks good, but we need to make it bolder. This isn't just a climate change initiative, it's about changing the entire economic framework. The way we produce, consume, and live." "We can do that," Gwen replied. "But we need buy-in from all sectors: governments, corporations, and the public. Everyone has to feel like they're part of it." "That's the key," Elon said, pacing around the room. "People need to feel that they're not just watching from the sidelines. They need to feel that they're the ones driving change." The plan that emerged from that meeting was ambitious, even by Elon's standards. It involved scaling up renewable energy infrastructure worldwide, launching a universal basic income pilot program to address economic inequality, and fostering a global education initiative that taught people how to live sustainably and cooperatively. The centerpiece of the plan was a massive collaboration between companies like Tesla, SpaceX, and others in the green tech sector, alongside nonprofits and governmental organizations working to solve the most pressing issues of the modern world. But perhaps the most radical part of the initiative was the focus on transforming the very notion of growth. In the old economic model, growth had always been synonymous with consumption, but this new model would be defined by positive impact: growth of human potential, of social equity, and of environmental restoration. Growth would no longer be measured by GDP or stock market returns, but by the progress humanity made towards solving its greatest challenges. In the weeks that followed, Elon crisscrossed the globe, speaking with world leaders, engaging in dialogue with environmental groups, and gathering feedback from communities that would be most affected by the changes. He wasn't just selling an idea, he was living it. He spent time in rural communities, walking the land with farmers, listening to workers at the Tesla Gigafactory in Nevada, and meeting with indigenous leaders in the Amazon. His vision was no longer just about Silicon Valley innovation. It was about real-world change that could be felt in every corner of the earth. During one particularly moving trip to the Pacific Islands, Elon met with leaders who were grappling with the devastating effects of climate change. Rising sea levels were threatening entire communities, and crops were failing due to unpredictable weather patterns. Yet, the people he met weren't looking for pity. They were looking for action, and they found that in Elon's vision. "We need to change the way the world works," one of the leaders said. "We can't do it alone, but with your help, we can make sure that what happens here never happens anywhere else." Elon's heart swelled with emotion. For the first time, he truly understood the global scope of the problem. This wasn't a future challenge, it was an urgent one, and he couldn't afford to wait for others to act. Meanwhile, back in Silicon Valley, Gwen was hard at work organizing a press conference to unveil the Global Sustainability Initiative to the world. It was to be a defining moment, one that would signal to the public and the private sectors alike that this movement wasn't just an idea, it was a call to arms. As the day of the press conference approached, the pressure mounted. Media outlets were already buzzing with speculation, and environmental groups were preparing to either praise or criticize the new initiative. Elon knew that not everyone would be on board. There would be skeptics, critics, and those who felt threatened by the radical shift in how business was done. but he was ready for it. The night before the big day, as he sat alone in his office at Tesla, Elon found himself reflecting on everything that had led him to this point. He thought about the old woman who had asked him, "Did God send you?" and the way her words had stayed with him. He had been questioning his role in the grander scheme of things ever since. Was he just a businessman, a tech mogul, or was there something deeper at play? The answer had become clear. He was a catalyst, a messenger for a new era. His mind wandered back to the words of the late Steve Jobs, who had once said, "The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do." Elon had always believed in the power of ideas. But now, more than ever, he understood that it wasn't just about thinking big. It was about inspiring others to think big together. The morning of the press conference arrived, and the energy was electric. Journalists, activists, and thought leaders from around the world filled the auditorium, eager to hear what Elon Musk had to say. Gwen stood beside him as they made their way to the stage, her expression a mix of excitement and determination. "Elon," she whispered, "this is it. This is the moment." Elon nodded. He took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage, the spotlight illuminating him. He could hear the murmur of the crowd, the clicking of cameras, and the anticipation hanging in the air. "Thank you all for being here," Elon began, his voice steady. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter in human history. A chapter where progress is measured not by how much we consume, but by how much we give back. We have a chance to build a world that works for everyone, and it starts today." The crowd fell silent as Elon continued, unveiling the Global Sustainability Initiative in full. The room erupted into applause, and for a moment, Elon stood there, looking out at the faces of the people who believed in this vision. The journey had just begun, and while the challenges ahead were daunting, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew the road would be long, but it was a road that had to be walked. And for the first time, he didn't feel like he was walking alone. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? In the days following the press conference, the buzz surrounding the Global Sustainability Initiative spread like wildfire. News outlets worldwide covered the event, framing it as the dawn of a new era in global cooperation. For Elon, the overwhelming response from the public and media was both exhilarating and humbling. People were listening, and more importantly, they were talking about the future, about possibilities, about what they could do to make a difference. But the positive momentum came with its share of resistance. As expected, not everyone was on board with Elon's vision. In fact, some of the world's most influential players were beginning to show signs of unease. Corporate leaders who had benefited from the old economic systems, political figures entrenched in long-standing policies, and skeptics from various industries began to push back against the sweeping changes Elon was advocating for. The first major clash came during a private meeting with several high-profile CEOs from leading oil, gas, and energy companies. The tension was palpable as Elon sat across from them in a sleek conference room in Manhattan. The CEOs were not strangers to Elon. They had often been critical of his aggressive stance on renewable energy, but this time felt different. They weren't just pushing back against his companies. They were pushing back against the very idea that the world could and should change. "You're asking for a revolution, Elon," one of the CEOs, Richard Harris, a seasoned executive in the fossil fuel industry, said, his voice dripping with skepticism. "And revolutions don't come without consequences. We're talking about disrupting economies, thousands of jobs, and entire industries. How do you expect people to simply switch from oil to electric? It's unrealistic." Elon leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. He had heard these arguments before. "The change is inevitable, Richard. We're already seeing the effects of climate change, the environmental degradation, the economic instability caused by fossil fuels. The question is not whether it will happen, but whether we will lead it or be dragged along by it." "You're not listening," another executive, Maria Delgado, cut in. "These are billions of dollars in investments we've made. People's livelihoods are tied to this industry. You can't just wave your hand and say change is coming. That's not how the real world works." Elon paused for a moment, gathering his thoughts. He wasn't here to argue over dollars and cents. He was here to change minds. I'm not suggesting we shut down industries overnight. This transition is going to take time. But if we don't start moving now, we're going to be left behind. The market is changing, and those who adapt will thrive. The others? He shrugged. They'll be left in the dust. There was a moment of silence, the weight of his words hanging in the air. It was clear that Elon's vision had struck a nerve, but the CEOs were far from convinced. This is a dangerous game you're playing, Harris warned. People will resist. You'll face protests, disruptions, and ultimately, people will blame you for the chaos. Are you ready for that? Elon's eyes locked with Harris's. I'd rather face that resistance and know I'm doing the right thing than sit back and watch as the world burns. The room grew colder as the conversation shifted to other matters, but the tension was undeniable. Elon knew this was just the beginning. The fight for a sustainable future wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be quick, but he was ready. Outside the boardroom, the media had caught wind of the meeting. The press began to speculate about the tensions between Elon and the fossil fuel industry, painting the picture of a David versus Goliath battle. The resistance was starting to form, and Elon knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. But there was another, more insidious force at play, one that he hadn't anticipated: the political pushback. 2 weeks later, Elon found himself in Washington, D.C., sitting across from members of the Senate Energy and Environment Committee. The room was packed with politicians, lobbyists, and energy experts, all gathered to discuss the future of the country's energy policy. The air was thick with the scent of heated arguments and shifting allegiances. The pressure was mounting. One of the committee members, Senator Emily Lawson, a staunch advocate for the oil and gas industry, leaned forward, eyeing Elon with skepticism. Mr. Musk, you've made a name for yourself with Tesla and SpaceX, but this new initiative, this so-called Global Sustainability Initiative, raises serious concerns. You're talking about restructuring the entire energy grid, redirecting billions of dollars into renewable resources, and upending our economic system. How do you justify that kind of disruption? Elon felt the familiar surge of frustration, but he kept his composure. The world has already been disrupted. The climate is changing, the world's resources are depleting, and we are running out of time. I'm not advocating for disruption's sake. I'm advocating for a sustainable future. The longer we delay this transition, the more expensive and painful it will be. Lawson scoffed. You're talking about government interference in the private sector, subsidies, and forcing businesses to follow your ideals. That's not a free market, Mr. Musk. That's socialism. Elon's eyes narrowed, his tone calm but firm. This isn't about politics. This is about survival. If we don't act now, there won't be a free market left to debate. Our economy is at risk. Our environment is at risk. And if we don't start taking bold action, we won't have a world in which to even have these discussions. There was an uneasy silence in the room. Some of the senators shifted uncomfortably, but others, those with close ties to the energy industry, remained unmoved. Senator Lawson smirked. You may have your science and your technology, Mr. Musk, but I've got something stronger: the votes. The people aren't on your side, and until they are, this initiative won't go anywhere. Elon stood up slowly, his expression unreadable. Maybe, but change is inevitable, and you can either be part of it or you can get out of the way. Back at Tesla's headquarters in Palo Alto, Elon sat in his office, reflecting on the day's events. He had always known that resistance would come. He had dealt with it before, from early doubters to competitors who thought Tesla would fail. But this felt different. This wasn't just about business. This was about reshaping the very fabric of society, and the pushback wasn't going to be limited to boardrooms and government halls. It was going to spread to the streets. But Elon wasn't deterred. If anything, the resistance only strengthened his resolve. He had always thrived in the face of adversity. In fact, adversity was often a sign that he was on the right path. As he stared out the window at the bustling city below, Elon thought about the long road ahead. The fight for a sustainable future wouldn't be won in a day. It would take years, maybe decades. There would be setbacks, battles, and moments of doubt. But he believed in the cause. He believed in the power of human ingenuity, and most importantly, he believed that humanity could rise to the challenge. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Elon Musk made a silent vow to himself. No matter the resistance, he would keep pushing forward. The future depended on it. Months passed, and Elon's resolve was tested in ways he hadn't anticipated. While the global sustainability initiative gained traction in some quarters, the resistance was growing fiercer. The oil and gas industry was doubling down, spending millions on ads to spread doubt about the viability of renewable energy. Politicians who had initially seemed willing to collaborate began to backpedal, wary of the backlash from their powerful donors. The media, ever hungry for conflict, found a narrative that was hard to ignore. Elon Musk, visionary or dangerous revolutionary? Despite the growing opposition, Elon remained committed to his vision. But as the resistance mounted, so did the pressure. There were days when he felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, the overwhelming sense that every step forward was met with an equal push backward. The path seemed less certain, and the stakes felt higher than ever. It was late one evening when the breaking point came. Elon was at SpaceX's headquarters in Hawthorne, standing on the balcony of his office, looking out over the sprawling industrial complex. His mind was racing with thoughts of everything he had to accomplish. The next step in the global sustainability initiative was crucial, bringing together the world's top leaders for a global summit to discuss the future of energy, climate action, and economic restructuring. But before he could take that next step, there was a crisis that needed immediate attention. Tesla's stock had taken a massive hit. Investors were panicking. A few influential voices in the financial world were beginning to question whether Elon's broader ambitions were hurting Tesla's core business. Reports were swirling about delays in new product launches, concerns over production timelines, and doubts about the profitability of long-term sustainability projects. As much as Elon hated the idea of bowing to shorter market pressures, he knew that his ability to lead these companies, and, by extension, the movement for change, was directly tied to the success of his businesses. He picked up the phone and dialed Gwen's number. "Hey, it's Elon. We need to talk," he said as soon as she picked up. "I know," Gwen replied, her voice calm but with an edge of urgency. "I've been following the news. Investors are getting nervous. I think it's time we address the elephant in the room." Elon paused for a moment. He didn't need to ask what she meant. He knew the conversation that was coming. "Tell me what you're thinking," he said. "We need to demonstrate to the market that Tesla is still on track to be the global leader in electric vehicles. We need to show them that we haven't lost focus on the bottom line," Gwen suggested. "This is a tough time, but if we can pull this off, the long-term payoff will be huge." Elon took a deep breath. He had always hated having to play by the market's rules, but he knew Gwen was right. There was a way forward, but it would require him to make some tough decisions. "All right, let's do this," he said, his voice filled with determination. "We're going to double down on our core mission, produce the best, most affordable electric cars in the world. But at the same time, we'll keep pushing forward with the global sustainability initiative. We can't lose sight of the bigger picture." The following days were a whirlwind of meetings, press conferences, and strategy sessions. Elon and Gwen worked tirelessly, speaking with key investors, addressing concerns about Tesla's long-term viability, and reaffirming the company's commitment to both profitability and the future of clean energy. They even launched a new campaign highlighting Tesla's innovation in energy storage and solar technology, focusing on how these products would help both homeowners and businesses transition to renewable energy. But despite their efforts, the pressure didn't let up. The media kept scrutinizing every move Elon made, amplifying every mistake, every delay, every piece of bad news. The financial analysts, many of whom had always been skeptical of Elon's more idealistic projects, were getting louder. They argued that the ambitious goals of the global sustainability initiative were distracting him from the core mission of running his companies. "Focus on the business, Elon," one of them wrote in a widely read column. "You can't save the world if you don't save yourself first." Elon was no stranger to criticism, but this felt different. The weight of the world was no longer just a metaphor. It was a reality. Every decision, every move he made, felt like it could tip the scales in one direction or the other. That night, after another round of meetings, Elon retreated to his private office at Tesla. He needed to think. The future was hanging in the balance, and he knew that if he didn't make the right call now, the entire movement he had started could fall apart. His mind wandered back to the conversation he'd had with that old woman. Did God send you? She had asked him that question, and for a moment, he had felt the weight of something much greater than himself. But now, in the face of so many challenges, he wasn't sure he had the answers. Could one man really change the world? Was it possible to carry the burden of an entire planet's future on his shoulders? He stood by the window, staring out at the city lights below. The night was quiet, but in his mind, the world was anything but. There was so much more to be done, and the obstacles seemed insurmountable. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Gwen. Elon, I just spoke with the board. We need a win. Something big. Something bold. We can't keep treading water like this. Elon read the message and sighed. She was right. It was time for something drastic. The following morning, Elon gathered his executive team at Tesla's headquarters. There was an air of quiet determination in the room as they sat around the table, waiting for him to speak. All right, here's the plan, Elon said, his voice cutting through the silence. We're going to accelerate the development of the Cybertruck. But not just that. We're going to make it the centerpiece of a new marketing campaign that connects our electric vehicles directly to the global sustainability initiative. We're going to show the world that sustainable technology doesn't just work. It's cool. It's the future. And it's here today. There was a moment of hesitation, but then the team nodded in agreement. They had been working toward this for months, but now Elon was asking them to go all in. We're also going to launch a massive initiative to expand our energy storage and solar business, making sure that every home and business can have access to clean, affordable energy, Elon continued. We're going to make the world see that renewable energy isn't just a nice-to-have, it's a necessity, and we're the ones who can make it happen. The room erupted into applause. It was bold, risky, and ambitious, but it was exactly what Tesla needed. It was a chance to show the world that the future was already here, and it was electric. As the days passed, the Cybertruck campaign rolled out with a level of excitement and energy that was palpable. Social media buzzed with anticipation as the prototype was unveiled, and Tesla's stock began to climb once again. The global sustainability initiative also gained new momentum, with world leaders and corporations expressing renewed interest in the ambitious goals Elon had set. For a moment, it seemed like the world had aligned behind him. But deep down, Elon knew that the hardest battles were still ahead. The true test was yet to come. The fight for a sustainable future was long from over, and the resistance was only going to grow stronger. But Elon was ready. The months that followed Tesla's bold Cybertruck campaign were a blur of activity, success, and mounting pressure. Elon Musk's name was now synonymous with radical change and innovation. The electric vehicle market was surging, and Tesla's stock had stabilized. But there was no denying that the battles he was facing were far from over. Every day felt like a race against time. The world was beginning to take climate change seriously, but the pace of progress still seemed far too slow. It wasn't just about convincing governments and corporations to change. It was about inspiring the world's citizens to join the movement. One particularly blistering afternoon, as Elon sat in his office, the weight of the world pressing against him, his phone rang. It was Gwen. Elon, she said, her voice urgent. I think we're at a tipping point. You need to see this. She was talking about an environmental disaster, a massive oil spill off the coast of Alaska. The news was everywhere, and the images were haunting. The spill was devastating to local wildlife, and the cleanup efforts were already expected to take years. There was one particular moment in the coverage that made Elon's heart drop. A footage of an oil-slicked pelican struggling to free itself, the blackened waters swallowing everything in its path. Elon's mind went to the global sustainability initiative. The work they were doing could solve so many of these issues. If only the world would commit to the change they were advocating. But it felt like a lifetime of work ahead, and the resistance wasn't letting up. That's the kind of thing that fuels the opposition, Gwen, Elon said as he stared at the TV screen. They'll say that renewable energy isn't reliable or scalable enough to replace fossil fuels. I know, Gwen replied, but it's also a reminder that we can't wait any longer. If we don't act, these disasters are going to become more frequent. We're already seeing it. Wildfires, floods, droughts, melting glaciers. This is the future we're facing, and it's happening right now. Elon nodded slowly. The urgency in Gwyn's voice mirrored the fire that had been growing inside him for years. He couldn't ignore the facts any longer, nor could he afford to be distracted by the endless pushback. The time for change was now. That evening, Elon found himself alone, reflecting on the weight of it all. The responsibility, the pressure, the resistance. It all felt like a storm building on the horizon. There were moments when he could almost feel the weight of the entire world pressing down on him, and tonight was one of those nights. He stood outside, looking up at the sky. The stars were clear, a reminder of how far humanity had come, and how far it still had to go. His mind wandered back to a conversation he had had with his father years ago, one that had stuck with him ever since. "You can't save everyone, Elon," his father had said, shaking his head in that way he always did when he was disappointed. "The world's too big, too messed up. You can't fix it. It'll break you first." At the time, Elon had been furious. He'd vowed to prove his father wrong, to show that one person could make a difference. And now, looking at the enormity of the challenge ahead, he understood his father's cynicism, just a little. There were moments when the fight seemed hopeless, like a never-ending battle against forces that were far bigger than himself. But then, there was that little voice inside him that refused to give up. His vision for a sustainable future wasn't just about technology. It was about human will. It was about the belief that humanity could change its course, that we had the power to make a difference before it was too late. The next morning, Elon walked into his office to find a stack of papers waiting for him. Reports, proposals, memos. Every day seemed like a never-ending barrage of details. But there was one report that caught his eye. A message from a contact in the government about an upcoming international summit in Berlin. The world's most powerful leaders were set to meet to discuss global climate action, energy policy, and trade. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The summit could either be the breakthrough he needed to drive the global sustainability initiative forward, or it could be another case of political inaction. The pressure to make an impact was overwhelming. This was the opportunity to solidify his position, to show the world that his vision wasn't just a pipe dream. Elon knew he had to be there. But the question was, could he convince the leaders of the world to commit to bold, unprecedented action? Berlin was buzzing with anticipation. The streets were filled with protesters demanding immediate action on climate change, while others held signs calling for corporate responsibility. The world was watching, and the stakes had never been higher. As Elon entered the conference hall, he was greeted by world leaders, scientists, and industry titans, all the major players in the climate debate. But this was no ordinary summit. Elon wasn't just there to speak about the future of renewable energy. He was there to demand action, immediate action. His speech was delivered with a force and urgency that left the room speechless. He outlined the stakes of climate change, the economic impact of inaction, and the devastating toll that disasters like the Alaskan oil spill were having on the planet. He spoke not just as a businessman, but as a human being who believed that change was possible. "The future of our planet is not negotiable," Elon said, his voice steady and unyielding. "We have the technology, we have the resources, but we lack the will. If we don't act now, we will lose everything. Our children will inherit a world that we failed to save, and I refuse to be complicit in that failure." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. The room was silent, an uncomfortable silence, the kind that comes when people are forced to confront a truth they'd been avoiding. For too long, we've allowed the forces of greed, complacency, and fear to dictate the future. Today, we have a choice. We can either be the generation that looked the other way, or we can be the generation that took bold, transformative action. I choose the latter, and I believe you will too. The summit ended on a note of cautious optimism. Several world leaders, including German Chancellor Maria Schneider and French President Alain Dupont, expressed their willingness to consider drastic action. But there were no immediate commitments, no guarantees. Elon returned to his hotel room feeling both exhausted and invigorated. The fight for a sustainable future had just entered a new phase. He had planted the seeds, but the real work had only just begun. He stared out of his hotel window, thinking of everything that had led him to this point. The struggles, the setbacks, the resistance. It all felt like it was building towards something bigger than himself. And yet, as powerful as his speech had been, he knew that words alone wouldn't be enough. It was time for action. Elon's return to the United States was met with a mix of exhaustion and renewed determination. He had made his mark at the summit in Berlin, but the road ahead remained rocky. The momentum was there, but it was fragile, dependent on the support of leaders who still lacked the political will to make the sweeping changes needed. Back in California, things were changing rapidly. Tesla was still on track with its projects, and SpaceX had reached a new milestone with the launch of its Starship prototype. The media buzz was incessant, and Elon's influence was undeniable. But despite all the progress in the tech world, the climate battle felt like it was stuck in a waiting game. Elon had been relentlessly pushing forward, but the world, government, corporations, and society seemed stuck in place, hesitant to take the leap. It was maddening, and so, as he often did when faced with immense pressure, he threw himself into the work. In the quiet of a late-night strategy meeting, Elon sat across from Gwen, his trusted partner and the woman who had been with him through thick and thin. The office was dimly lit, the only sound the hum of the cooling systems and the rustle of papers on the table. "We need a breakthrough," Elon said, his voice steady but urgent. "Something bold. Something that forces the issue." Gwen studied him, her brow furrowed. She knew Elon well enough to know that he wasn't speaking about just business. He was talking about the movement, the mission that transcended any product or service Tesla or SpaceX could offer. "We can't afford another summit," she said. "We need action, something the world can see and understand. People need to feel it." Elon nodded. "I agree. I'm done talking. It's time for a demonstration." In the days that followed, Elon and Gwen crafted a daring new plan. It wasn't just about introducing a new product or pushing for a policy change. It was about sending a message that could not be ignored. Elon's vision was clear. They would build the largest solar energy grid in the world, a massive interconnected system that could power entire cities. It would be both a technological feat and a direct challenge to the fossil fuel giants. But that wasn't the only part of the plan. Alongside the solar grid, Elon would launch a new initiative called Project Gaia, a global campaign to fund and deploy clean energy solutions to the world's poorest nations. The initiative would target countries suffering the worst effects of climate change and offer them access to renewable energy free of charge. The world was about to witness the boldest move in the history of renewable energy. If it worked, it could change everything. As the project began to take shape, Elon found himself faced with yet another challenge: convincing the international community that such a project was feasible. The backlash from the oil and gas industry had been intense since Berlin, but now the stakes were higher. The fossil fuel lobby was not about to let go of its grip on the global energy market without a fight. One morning, while reviewing plans with his engineering team at SpaceX, Elon's phone buzzed. It was a news alert. World's largest oil company, Redstone Global, announces new campaign to challenge radical green initiatives. Elon clicked the link, his stomach tightening. The article was a scathing critique of Project Gaia and Tesla's push to revolutionize energy. Redstone Global had announced a multi-billion-dollar campaign to discredit the global sustainability movement and support the continued dominance of fossil fuels. The message was clear: do not let Elon Musk redefine the future. The corporate world wasn't the only opposition. As the media latched onto the growing debate, a powerful conservative faction had begun to mobilize. They had already painted Elon as a radical, an outsider, a man whose idealism endangered jobs and the global economy. But the backlash didn't faze Elon. If anything, it only made him more determined. It had been a long time since he felt fear in the face of adversity. Elon and his team spent months planning, collaborating, and constructing the framework for the solar grid that would one day provide energy to millions. The first phase was set to begin in the deserts of the Middle East, a region where energy needs were growing rapidly and where the sun's potential for solar power was virtually limitless. The region was one of the last places Elon expected to find allies in the battle for clean energy, but to his surprise, he found open doors. Several governments in the region, recognizing the potential for solar energy, were eager to partner in the project. In particular, the United Arab Emirates, UAE, had been quietly investing in renewable technologies for years. Seeing the writing on the wall, oil was no longer the future. Elon's trip to the UAE marked a turning point. The meetings were tense at first, as he and his team laid out their ambitious plans for the solar grid. The UAE officials were cautious, questioning the practicality of such a massive initiative. But Elon's persistence and his track record of disrupting industries won them over. They agreed to support the project. It was the first step in what would become a global partnership, and the momentum shifted. For the first time in years, Elon felt as if the world was starting to catch up to his vision. The launch of Project Gaia was a global event. The first phase of the solar grid in the UAE was unveiled, and the impact was immediate. It was a success, far beyond anyone's expectations. The massive array of solar panels began producing clean energy, which was immediately fed into the grid, helping power cities that had previously been dependent on fossil fuels. Elon stood on the stage at the unveiling ceremony, the desert sun blazing overhead, watching as energy flowed from the solar array into homes and businesses. The future, he thought, was finally beginning to take shape. But it wasn't just about the project itself, it was the ripple effect it would have. News outlets across the world picked up on the story, and for the first time in years, the narrative about renewable energy wasn't focused on its potential drawbacks. The success of the UAE project had proven that large-scale solar was not only possible but essential. As the project expanded into Africa, Asia, and Latin America, it became clear that Elon's vision for a sustainable future was taking hold. Despite the victories, the fight was far from over. The oil and gas lobby continued to fight back, launching their own campaigns and pushing for legislation that would protect their interests. But with each new partnership, with each successful installation of solar grids in developing countries, Elon's position grew stronger. It wasn't just about technology anymore. It was a movement, a fight for the future of humanity. As Elon looked out over the solar fields in the Middle East, he realized that this was only the beginning. The fight for the planet, for its people, and for a sustainable future was more than a battle. It was a revolution. And it was one he was determined to win. With each passing day, Project Gaia expanded its reach, and the world was taking notice. The solar fields in the UAE were just the beginning. Across Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, vast networks of solar panels were being deployed, providing affordable, clean energy to millions of people. Elon's vision was becoming a reality, but so too was the backlash from the entrenched powers that had dominated the global energy landscape for over a century. The oil and gas industry, which had long maintained its stranglehold on the world's economy, was growing desperate. Their billions in profits, their political influence, and their ability to sway public opinion were now being challenged by the very technology they had long ignored. And they weren't going down without a fight. Elon sat in his office late one evening, staring at the screen in front of him. The news was full of reports about a new coalition of oil companies, conservative think tanks, and political action committees who were beginning to unite under one banner: Save Energy, Save Jobs. Their mission was clear: to disrupt the momentum of clean energy initiatives by casting doubt on their viability and economic impact. The message was everywhere. The green revolution is a threat to your livelihood. Renewable energy will kill jobs. Elon Musk's vision is a pipe dream, too expensive and too risky. It was a campaign designed to sway public opinion, leveraging the fear of uncertainty, the loss of jobs, and the idea that sustainable energy could never replace fossil fuels on a global scale. And it was working. Public support for Project Gaia was still strong, but cracks were beginning to appear in the foundation. Elon picked up his phone and called Gwen. "We need to hit back hard," he said, his voice low but urgent. "They're playing dirty, and we need to counter it before it spreads any further." "I know," Gwen replied, "but we've got to be careful. If we go too aggressive, we risk alienating people who are on the fence. We need to show them that we're not just about pushing a product, we're here to solve a problem." Elon sighed and rubbed his temples. "I get that. But if we don't push back hard enough, we could lose everything." There was a long pause on the line. Gwen was right. They had to walk a fine line between being forceful and maintaining the moral high ground. "We need to get ahead of the narrative," Elon said finally. "We'll release a full report showing the long-term economic benefits of renewable energy, not just in terms of jobs, but in the reduction of healthcare costs, environmental cleanup, and infrastructure investment. We need to make it clear that the transition to clean energy isn't just necessary, it's inevitable. Got it, Gwen responded. I'll get the team on it. We'll need the backing of some influential economists, and we should roll it out with a global media campaign. Elon nodded. They had no choice but to meet the growing resistance head-on. The fossil fuel giants weren't going to just fade into the background. They had the money, the resources, and the influence to wage a prolonged war of attrition. In the days that followed, Tesla, SpaceX, and the Global Sustainability Initiative went into overdrive. A multi-pronged media blitz was launched, showcasing the undeniable benefits of renewable energy, not just for the environment but for the economy and public health as well. They enlisted top economists and climate scientists to back their claims, making the case that transitioning to clean energy would create millions of new jobs, boost economic growth, and reduce the catastrophic costs of climate change-related disasters. But the response from the opposition was swift and fierce. Corporate-funded think tanks and high-profile lobbyists began flooding the media with their own reports, claiming that clean energy was too expensive, unreliable, and unable to meet the world's growing energy demands. They even began to question the safety of solar power, citing a handful of isolated incidents where installations had malfunctioned or been damaged in extreme weather events. The world was beginning to divide into two factions. The innovators, led by Elon, pushing for a sustainable future, and the status quo, defending the old ways of doing business, even if those ways were damaging the planet. One particularly heated moment came when Elon was invited to testify before a Senate subcommittee on energy policy. The hearing was scheduled in the wake of the growing public backlash, and the fossil fuel lobby had pulled out all the stops to ensure that their interests were protected. The hearing was meant to address the viability of renewable energy, but it quickly became clear that the opposition was more interested in defending their profits than finding solutions. Elon sat at the witness table, flanked by industry experts and climate scientists who supported the push for renewable energy. On the other side, the oil and gas lobbyists had brought their own experts, economists, and former energy executives, who were ready to argue that the transition to clean energy would lead to a massive economic collapse. The chairman of the subcommittee, Senator John Murphy, opened the floor. "Mr. Musk," he said, his voice dripping with skepticism, "you've built your empire on electric cars and solar energy. But the question on the table is simple. Can renewable energy actually replace fossil fuels in the foreseeable future? Can we trust your vision of a world powered by solar panels and wind turbines?" Elon took a breath, his mind racing with the weight of the moment. This was it, his chance to defend the future. "The answer is yes," Elon said, his voice unwavering. "Renewable energy is not just a dream. It's already happening. It's already working. The question isn't whether it's possible, it's whether we're willing to do what's necessary to make it happen on a global scale." Murphy scoffed. "But what about the jobs? What about the millions of people who rely on the oil and gas industry for their livelihoods? Are we supposed to throw them all away?" Elon's gaze didn't falter. "I understand the concern, but the reality is, the jobs of the future won't come from fossil fuels. They'll come from the renewable energy sector, from building solar panels, from creating clean energy infrastructure, from designing new technologies. These are the jobs of tomorrow, and they'll be more sustainable, more rewarding, and better for our planet." Murphy raised an eyebrow. "And who's going to pay for this? You expect taxpayers to foot the bill for this green revolution?" Elon leaned forward, his hands resting on the table. "The cost of inaction is far higher than the cost of innovation. The disasters we're already seeing, wildfires, hurricanes, droughts, are already costing billions. Renewable energy is an investment in our future, not just in terms of the environment, but in our economy, our security, and our health." The room was silent for a moment. The opposition didn't have an immediate answer, but the damage had been done. Elon had taken the fight directly to the heart of the establishment. By the end of the hearing, there was no definitive resolution, but Elon had made his point. The fossil fuel industry's grip on the Senate was weakening, and their narrative was starting to crumble. Public opinion was beginning to shift, and as Project Gaia continued to expand, the world was waking up to the fact that the clean energy revolution wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. Elon wasn't fooling himself. The road ahead was still fraught with challenges. The resistance would only grow stronger. But for the first time in a long while, he felt something he hadn't in years: hope. Hope that the tide was turning. Hope that, despite the opposition, the world was finally beginning to recognize the urgency of the moment. And most of all, hope that the future was still within reach. It had been a few weeks since the Senate hearing, and the air around Elon Musk had started to shift. The public's attention was now more focused on the undeniable impact of his ventures: SpaceX's successful Mars mission, the accelerating rollout of Tesla's energy products, and the massive expansions of Project Gaia. Despite the aggressive resistance from the oil and gas lobby, Elon was starting to feel the winds of change. However, amidst the whirlwind of progress, there remained a gnawing feeling deep inside him, a feeling that, despite all the technological achievements and growing support for renewable energy, something was still missing. The world was moving forward, but it wasn't moving fast enough. It was early morning when Elon received a call that would set the course for the next chapter of his journey. The voice on the other end was calm, yet urgent. "Elon, we need you here," Gwen's voice crackled through the line. "There's someone you need to meet." "Who?" Elon asked, his curiosity piqued. "A woman," Gwen replied. "A very old woman. She insists she has something to tell you." Elon raised an eyebrow. "Is this some kind of joke?" "No," Gwen said firmly. "I've spoken to her. She's not someone you'd expect. Trust me, you need to hear her out. I'll send a car to pick you up." Elon arrived at the location shortly after receiving Gwen's message. It was a quiet house in a suburban neighborhood just outside of Palo Alto. The kind of place that looked unremarkable from the outside, but there was something different about the air around it. There was a strange sense of calm, of stillness, like the house itself was holding a secret. He was ushered inside, where an elderly woman waited in a modest living room. Her hair was silver, and her face was wrinkled with age, but her eyes sparkled with a kind of quiet intensity that drew him in immediately. "Elon Musk," she said, her voice surprisingly strong for someone of her years. "I've been waiting for you." Elon stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure of how to respond. "I'm sorry, but who are you?" The woman smiled warmly. "My name is Sarah, but you can call me Sarah. I've had a feeling you'd come one day." Elon felt an odd pull to sit down in front of her. There was something about her presence, an unspoken weight, that felt almost inevitable, as if this meeting had been written in the stars long before he had stepped foot into this room. "Gwen told me you wanted to speak with me," Elon said, trying to keep the conversation grounded. "What's this about?" Sarah's eyes softened, and for a moment, her gaze seemed to pierce through him, as if she could see all the questions and fears that lay hidden beneath his usual stoic exterior. "I know you've been struggling," she said softly. "You've been fighting a battle, and you're weary. But I need you to understand something. There's a greater purpose at work here, something beyond the politics, the tech, and the corporations." Elon was taken aback. "I don't know what you mean," he said, his voice tinged with skepticism. "I'm trying to change the world, make it better for future generations. That's all." Sarah nodded slowly, her expression gentle yet knowing. "I believe you. But sometimes, Elon, the world needs more than just your intellect, more than just your will. It needs something else, a spark, a vision that reaches beyond the material, beyond the achievements." She paused, letting her words settle into the room. Elon didn't know what to make of this woman. Her cryptic words, the feeling that lingered in the air. "What are you saying?" he asked, his tone firm now. Sarah reached out and placed a hand on the table between them. "You've been sent here for a reason, Elon. Do you know that? You didn't just rise to the top of the tech world by accident. You were chosen. You are part of something bigger. God has a plan for you." Elon froze. For the first time in years, a chill ran down his spine. The word God hung in the air between them like a heavy weight. It wasn't the first time someone had said something like that to him, but it was the first time it felt real. "God sent me?" Elon repeated slowly, almost disbelieving. Sarah's eyes never left his. "Yes, and it's not just about technology or space. It's about something more. A legacy of change, not just for this world, but for the soul of humanity." Elon leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. This wasn't the kind of conversation he was used to. He had always been a man of science, of numbers, of concrete plans. He was a pragmatist, not a believer in divine interventions or grand prophecies. But there was something in her words, something unexplainable, that made him question everything he thought he knew. "I'm not sure I understand," he said quietly. How does that fit with what I'm doing?" Sarah's voice softened, and she leaned in slightly. "You've been building things, Elon. You've been changing the world with technology. But you're also changing the world with your heart, with your willingness to take risks, to go where others won't, to challenge the status quo. You're not just building machines, you're building a future. And that future is about more than just sustainability or wealth. It's about healing, about redemption, about restoring humanity's connection to something greater." Elon remained silent, his mind overwhelmed by the weight of her words. It was as if a new layer of his purpose was unfolding in front of him, one that went beyond the ambitions of Tesla or SpaceX. This was about something deeper, a mission that transcended even the grandest technological achievements. Sarah smiled gently. "Do you understand now, Elon? Do you see why you've been chosen for this path?" He opened his mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. Instead, he felt a sudden surge of emotion, a sense of clarity, of purpose, flooding his chest. For the first time in years, he felt like he had a deeper understanding of what drove him, what was at stake. "I think I understand," Elon finally said, his voice quieter than usual, "but I don't know where to go from here." Sarah's smile deepened. "That's the beauty of it, Elon. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to keep moving forward. Keep believing. Keep acting. The rest will unfold as it should." As Elon left Sarah's house later that day, his mind was in a state of quiet turmoil. He had always believed in the power of science, in the ability of humans to shape their own destiny. But now, for the first time, he felt the weight of something greater, a force beyond technology, beyond politics, beyond even his own efforts. Could it be true? Could his work be part of something more than just a global energy revolution? Was there a larger purpose, a divine plan at work, guiding him toward a future he couldn't yet see? The questions lingered in his mind, and as the car sped through the streets of Palo Alto, he found himself staring out the window, wondering if this was just the beginning of a new chapter in his life. A chapter where technology and faith, science and spirit, would come together to shape the future of humanity. Elon couldn't shake the words Sarah had spoken. The quiet, unassuming woman had opened up a door in his mind, a door to something that had always been just outside his view, a possibility that had never quite made sense, but now seemed to hold the key to something much larger. Was it possible that all his ventures, his ambition, his restless drive, were part of a bigger plan? Or was this just a fleeting moment, a distraction from the hard, practical realities of the world he was working to change? He didn't know the answer, but the questions kept gnawing at him. The urgency of his mission, Project Gaia, the global clean energy initiative, had never felt more real. It wasn't just a fight against the fossil fuel giants anymore. It was a battle for humanity's future, a fight for the very soul of the planet. And somehow, he had been chosen to lead it. The following week, Elon dove back into his work with an intensity he hadn't felt before. He met with his team at Tesla and SpaceX, focused on accelerating the pace of their projects, ensuring that the breakthroughs they were working on could scale to meet the needs of billions. But in the quiet moments, when the rush of deadlines and meetings faded into the background, the conversation with Sarah would resurface. Was he truly being guided? And if so, how could he use that guidance to push forward, not just for the success of his companies, but for the benefit of humanity? Late one evening, as the world outside his office in Palo Alto slept, Elon found himself alone in the quiet space, staring at his laptop screen. His thoughts kept drifting back to the same place, the challenge of convincing the world that the future was worth building. Project Gaia was growing, but there were still skeptics, still powerful players who didn't want the world to change. Oil and gas industries weren't going to roll over. They were fighting dirty, and if Elon was to succeed, he needed more than just great technology. He needed the world to believe in a new vision. As if on cue, an email notification flashed on his screen, breaking his reverie. It was from Gwen. Subject: urgent. Possible partnership for Gaia. The email outlined a new opportunity. An influential global coalition, spanning governments, philanthropists, and environmental groups, had reached out, offering to back Project Gaia in an unprecedented way. They believed that they could bring together international support and financial resources to make Elon's vision a reality. This would give him the momentum needed to tip the scales once and for all, even in the face of mounting resistance. But there was a catch. This coalition was requesting a personal meeting with Elon. They wanted to discuss their plans, and most importantly, they wanted him to hear the message of their vision directly from them. Elon felt a stir of excitement. This could be the turning point. This could be what changed everything. But there was something else, too. An unease that hovered in the back of his mind. Would these people truly share his vision? Or was there another agenda at play? A week later, Elon found himself seated in a sleek, modern conference room in Geneva, Switzerland, surrounded by leaders from the coalition. Representatives from governments around the world, business moguls with deep pockets, and influential environmental activists were all in attendance, and the air was thick with the sense that this was a pivotal moment in history. The group's spokesperson, a tall, sharp-eyed woman in her 50s named Mara Devine, stood at the front of the room. She was calm, collected, and exuded a quiet confidence that immediately commanded attention. "Mr. Musk," Mara said, her voice measured but intense, "we've been watching your work for a long time. What you've done with Tesla, with SpaceX, is nothing short of revolutionary. You've reshaped industries. You've proven that sustainability is not just an ideal, but a reality. But now, we're asking you to do something even more." Elon leaned forward slightly, intrigued but cautious. "And what would that be?" "We want to back Project Gaia," Mara continued. "Not just with financial resources, but with our networks, our political influence, and our commitment to creating a global movement. Together, we can ensure that the transition to clean energy isn't just a possibility, it's inevitable." Elon's mind raced. This was everything he had been working for, everything he had dreamed of. The ability to shift the global paradigm, not with isolated success stories, but with the backing of governments, financial institutions, and activists all over the world. This could be the catalyst for true global change. But then Mara said something that made him pause. "There's a condition," she added, her voice turning serious. "We need to ensure that your plans align with the interests of the most powerful players in the world. The energy giants, the corporations, and yes, even some of the political leaders who have supported your efforts in the past. They need to see that their future is safe in this new world. The transition must happen, but it cannot happen at the cost of their control." Elon's heart sank. He had known that there would be compromises, that any large-scale movement would come with difficult decisions. But this sounded like an ultimatum. Mara met his gaze. "We're not asking you to abandon your vision, Mr. Musk. We're asking you to make it palatable for those who hold the reins of power, to bring them to the table." Elon's mind spun. This was what he had feared. The same systems he had been fighting against, the oil giants, the political elites, were trying to co-opt his vision. They wanted control. They didn't want true change. They wanted a future that looked like the past, just with cleaner energy and a more polished facade. For a long moment, there was silence in the room. Elon could feel the weight of the decision pressing on him. Should he take this offer? Secure the financial and political power needed to make Project Gaia a reality, even if it meant compromising the very ideals that had driven him to this point? Or should he reject the offer, stay true to his vision, and risk everything for the chance of a cleaner, more equitable future? "Thank you for the offer," Elon said, finally breaking the silence. "But I have to be honest, I don't believe we can compromise on this. The future we're building must be one of true transformation, not one where the old power structures are preserved. If we're going to change the world, we need to change everything." Mara's face hardened, but she nodded. "I understand, Mr. Musk. But remember, this isn't just your battle. The world is filled with forces that will do anything to stop you. I only hope you can see the bigger picture before it's too late." The meeting ended abruptly, and as Elon left the conference room, a deep sense of uncertainty settled in his gut. He had made a stand, yes, but at what cost? Would this decision push him further into isolation? Would it be the right call for Project Gaia? As the plane took off from Geneva, heading back to California, Elon couldn't help but feel the weight of his decision. He had chosen the hard path, the right path, but what if it wasn't enough? The turning point had arrived, and now, more than ever, Elon knew that the fight for the future was far from over. Elon Musk spent the next few days in a fog of uncertainty. The decision to reject the coalition's offer had felt righteous in the moment, but as the days passed, he found himself questioning whether he had made the right choice. He was used to being the disruptor, the one who challenged the status quo, but this time, the stakes were higher. It wasn't just about business. It was about the future of the planet, about humanity's survival. And the question gnawed at him. Had he just thrown away the chance to make real, global change? The calls started coming in. Gwyn, Lori, JB. They all tried to reach him, eager to talk, to understand why he had made such a bold, perhaps reckless decision. But Elon avoided their calls, needing time to process the weight of it all. He couldn't help but feel that, despite his insistence on staying true to his vision, the reality was far more complex than he had anticipated. He went for long walks on the SpaceX campus, trying to clear his mind. The cool California breeze carried the faint smell of the Pacific Ocean, but it did little to calm the storm raging inside him. What was the right path? What if he was wrong? That evening, alone in his office, Elon opened the email from Sarah. Subject, a message for you. He hesitated for a moment, unsure of what he might find. Sarah had given him no indication that she had been watching his recent decisions. But still, he clicked the email open. Dear Elon, I know you're struggling. I can sense it in your energy, your silence. I've been praying for you, hoping that the clarity you need will find its way to your heart. The road you're walking is hard, but remember, it is not the destination that matters most. It is the journey and the choices you make along the way. The world is full of distractions, of temptations to abandon your truth for easier paths. But you know in your heart that the only way forward is to stay true to the path you've chosen. You were given this vision for a reason, and it will not fail. Gaia will grow. The world will change, but not without struggle and not without sacrifices. The forces that are pushing against you are powerful, but they will not win, as long as you keep moving forward with integrity. Remember this, Elon. When the storm feels the hardest, that's when you're closest to the breakthrough. Don't turn back now. Sarah. Elon stared at the screen for a long time. Her words felt like a balm on the wound that had been growing inside him. They brought no immediate answers, but they brought something else, a quiet, persistent certainty that he had been lacking. It wasn't just about the political deals or financial backing. It was about staying true to the purpose that had driven him from the beginning. It was about changing the world, not just in terms of technology, but in the very way humanity interacted with the planet. If he abandoned that vision, he wouldn't just lose the battle, he would lose himself. The next morning, as Elon prepared for the upcoming press conference for Tesla's latest model, he made a decision. He would call Gwyn, JB, and Lori. He would explain his decision, even if it didn't make sense to them. He needed to let them in, to understand why he couldn't compromise. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about a fight for the future of humanity, and if they didn't understand that, then perhaps they weren't the right people to stand by his side. When the call with Gwyn finally came through, it was clear she wasn't happy, but she listened. Elon, she began, her voice steady but concerned. We've talked about this. The coalition has the power to make things happen. They could get us through the bottleneck we're facing. The world is moving so fast, and we're running out of time. I know, Elon replied quietly, his voice tight. But we can't just let them control the narrative. They want to make it seem like we're building the future, but they're really just trying to keep control of it. It's not enough to just clean up the environment. They want to profit off it. And that's not why I'm doing this. You're right, Gwyn said after a pause, a hint of understanding in her voice. But there's a difference between playing their game and winning. You can't change the world by isolating yourself. We need to find a way to work with them, not against them. Elon didn't respond immediately. The pressure of the situation was building, and he could feel his frustration rising. I don't think you get it. I've spent my whole life trying to build something better, something real. I won't sell out just to get this off the ground. Gwyn's voice softened. I get it, Elon. But you need to realize that the world doesn't change overnight. You can't build something revolutionary without some compromise. You've always told me that. I know, Elon muttered. I feel like I'm being pulled in a million directions, and I don't know what the right choice is anymore. Later that day, after the press conference wrapped up, Elon took a moment to himself. He needed to find clarity, not in the rush of meetings and projects, but in silence. He retreated to a quiet corner of the SpaceX headquarters, and there, alone with his thoughts, he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. It was during this quiet moment that something changed. A sudden realization washed over him. It wasn't about finding the perfect plan. It was about continuing to take action, even when the path ahead was unclear. It was about leading with purpose, not perfection. The future wouldn't be won by waiting for the perfect moment or making the perfect deal. It would be won by those who refused to give up, by those who kept pushing forward despite the doubts, despite the setbacks. The key wasn't to have all the answers, it was to keep moving. As the weeks passed, Elon's resolve grew stronger. The weight of the world hadn't lifted, but he had learned something vital. Faith didn't require certainty. It required trust. Trust in himself. Trust in the people who believed in his vision. And most importantly, trust that the purpose behind his work was greater than any single obstacle. He still didn't know if his rejection of the coalition was the right decision. The future remained as uncertain as ever. But for the first time in a long while, Elon Musk was no longer consumed by fear. He was ready, and he wasn't going to back down. It had been several months since Elon's pivotal meeting in Geneva, and his days were filled with the relentless hustle of working on Project Gaia, Tesla, SpaceX, and other ventures that consumed his every waking moment. Yet, despite the challenges and the weight of the world bearing down on his shoulders, Elon felt a strange sense of clarity. The doubts he had experienced following the rejection of the coalition's offer had started to dissipate, replaced by a quiet confidence. He was walking a difficult path, but it was the right one. However, things weren't so simple. Every major step forward seemed to come with 2 steps back. Tesla's production lines were growing, but the supply chain issues that had plagued the company since its inception had only intensified. The demand for electric vehicles was higher than ever, but there simply weren't enough materials, specifically lithium and cobalt, to meet it. Elon knew they needed to find a sustainable solution for the growing demand. A more efficient way to mine and refine these resources, or perhaps to recycle them, was the only way forward. The thought of meeting the world's needs without destroying the planet weighed on him like a ton of bricks. Meanwhile, SpaceX was facing mounting pressure to get their next Mars mission off the ground. The idea of multiplanetary existence had once felt like a far-off dream, something that could be put off indefinitely. But now, as Earth's climate continued to spiral toward catastrophic tipping points, Elon knew time was running out. If humanity was going to survive the next century, Mars could not remain a distant goal. It had to become a reality. Late one evening, as Elon worked late into the night on a new propulsion system designed for Starship, his thoughts wandered again to Sarah's words. He had followed her advice to keep moving forward despite the uncertainty. He had followed it in the face of political pressure, corporate resistance, and technological limitations. But now, standing on the edge of what felt like an impossible task, he needed something more. He needed guidance, not just from his team or his advisors, but from something deeper, something spiritual, something to anchor him when the weight of the world became too much to carry. It was at that moment that the phone rang. The name on the caller ID made Elon hesitate. Sarah. He hadn't spoken to her since the fateful conversation about the future of Project Gaia. But that night, he felt an undeniable pull. He picked up the phone. Sarah, he greeted, his voice weary. I've been thinking about what you said. I think I've made progress, but there are moments when I feel like I'm about to break. There was a pause on the other end, and then Sarah's calm voice responded. I know you're struggling, Elon. I feel it too. But I want you to remember something. You didn't get here by accident. The universe doesn't work that way. You were chosen for this path. Elon closed his eyes for a moment. Chosen? Chosen for what? To save the planet? To build rockets to Mars? All these things feel like they're beyond me. Like they're too big for anyone, even me. Sarah's voice softened. You're not alone in this, Elon. The challenges you face are immense, but that's why you were given the ability to overcome them. Do you remember the conversation we had when you asked me if I thought God had sent you? My answer wasn't about making you feel special. It was about recognizing the power you hold in your hands, even if you don't fully understand it. Elon's heart skipped a beat. And what is that power, Sarah? It's your vision, your courage to push past fear, to see beyond the immediate. But more importantly, it's your heart. That's the source of your true strength, she replied, her voice now almost a whisper. You have the ability to change the world, Elon, not just with technology, but with your belief in what's possible. If you let that guide you, you will succeed. The conversation left Elon with a profound sense of peace that he hadn't felt in a long time. Sarah didn't have all the answers, but she gave him something much more powerful: faith. The next day, as Elon sat at his desk in the Tesla design studio, staring at a blueprint for a new solar panel that could revolutionize energy storage, the weight of the decision he had made in Geneva came rushing back. The rejection of the coalition's deal now seemed both like a victory and a risk. But as he looked at the faces of the engineers, scientists, and visionaries working alongside him, he realized something important. They were all in this together. And together, they could change the world. It was at that moment that Elon made another decision, one that would set the course for the rest of his life. He called a meeting with Gwen, JB, and Lori. The trio arrived at Tesla's headquarters, their expressions filled with curiosity and a bit of apprehension. They knew that Elon had been deep in thought lately, but they weren't sure what to expect. When they entered the conference room, Elon was waiting for them, sitting at the head of the table, his eyes focused, his posture resolute. Elon, Gwen said, her voice tinged with concern. What's going on? I've been doing a lot of thinking, Elon began, his voice calm but firm, and I've come to a conclusion. I've rejected the coalition's offer. I know that was a big decision, and it's not one I took lightly. But now, I'm asking you all to trust me. JB raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I'm going to take Project Gaia in a new direction, Elon said. I'm not interested in negotiating with the people who want to control the future of the planet. I'm going to find a way to make it happen, without them, but I need your help. This journey won't be easy. It's going to require all of us to work together like never before. Lori, always the pragmatic one, leaned forward. You're talking about going to war with the establishment. You realize what that means, right? We'll be up against more than just corporate interests. We'll be facing entire governments, entire industries. Elon nodded. I know, but it's the only way. We can't change the world by compromising with the very forces that are holding us back. I've seen the future, and I know that we can get there, together. The next few months were filled with a new sense of purpose. Elon and his team at Tesla, SpaceX, and Solar City pushed forward with more urgency than ever before. They worked late into the night, breaking down barriers that had once seemed insurmountable. Elon knew that the world wouldn't change overnight. But with every new innovation, every breakthrough, he was one step closer to turning his vision into reality. And as the days passed, he found himself trusting in something greater than just the technology he was creating. He trusted in the vision. He trusted in his team. And he trusted that the world would come to see the truth in what he was building. Elon sat in the dimly lit conference room at Tesla's headquarters, staring at the large screen in front of him. His team had just finished reviewing the final details for the rollout of Project Gaia, the global clean energy initiative he had envisioned for years. The plan was ambitious, to say the least. A complete transformation of the world's energy infrastructure, powered by solar, wind, and the innovative storage technologies Tesla had developed. But today, something felt different. The stakes were no longer theoretical. The implications were real. Outside the walls of the Tesla campus, the world was beginning to take notice of the movement he had set in motion. There were whispers in the media, murmurs in the halls of power. On one hand, environmental groups were heralding him as a hero. On the other, the corporations, entrenched governments, and fossil fuel magnates were starting to mobilize against him. What was once a fringe movement was now at the center of the global conversation. And with that attention came both opportunity and danger. Elon, Gwen said, breaking his reverie as she entered the room. The situation is escalating. The heads of the major oil companies, Chevron, Exxon, are starting to make public statements. They're calling you a threat to the global economy. They're not playing nice anymore. Elon didn't flinch. He had expected this. He had known that the moment Project Gaia gained momentum, the forces that benefited from the status quo would fight back. But he was prepared. He had always been prepared. "I've been expecting this," Elon said, his voice calm but resolute. "The fight is about to get real. But I've never been afraid of playing hardball. And this time, we're playing to win." He paused, looking at the map of the world on the screen. Over the next few months, Project Gaia would roll out in several key regions: the United States, Europe, and select countries in Asia. They would start with a bold move, creating solar grids and power storage systems that would run entire cities, cutting reliance on fossil fuels. The long-term vision was for the entire globe to transition to clean, sustainable energy within the next few decades. But that meant taking down the existing power structures, and that was no small task. "Elon," Gwyn said, stepping closer to him, "I think we need to brace for more than just economic opposition. We're talking about global political pressure. You've seen the statements from some world leaders. They're not just questioning the viability of Gaia, they're questioning the very legitimacy of your movement. They're calling you a tech oligarch, a disruptor with too much power. They're afraid of what we're doing." "I don't care about what they're afraid of," Elon replied, his voice growing more intense. "What matters is what happens next. The future of the planet is at stake. And if we don't stand up now, we might not get another chance." As the days wore on, Elon found himself more consumed with the challenge ahead. The pressure was mounting from all sides. The major oil companies had started a campaign to discredit Tesla and SpaceX, questioning the practicality of electric vehicles and space exploration. They labeled him an idealist with no understanding of economics, of how the world worked. But what they didn't understand, what no one truly understood, was that Elon Musk didn't care about the old rules. He wasn't trying to fit into their world. He was trying to build a new one. And as always, Elon's mind turned to Sarah. Her words had resonated with him deeply. She had always reminded him that his journey wasn't just about technology or profit. It was about something greater, a new world. A world where humanity wasn't at the mercy of fossil fuels, where people lived in harmony with the planet. One late evening, when the tension of the days had begun to take a physical toll on him, Elon found himself standing at the window of his office at SpaceX's headquarters in Hawthorne, California. The sprawling complex was quiet now, but the energy in the air was palpable. This was a moment of reckoning. The stakes had never been higher. His thoughts were interrupted by a ping on his phone. A text message from Lori. "Lori, Elon, I think it's time for us to meet with the coalition again. They may have what we need to move this forward. The world is too far gone for idealism alone. We need power, political, economic. Let's bring them to the table." Elon stared at the screen, conflicted. He knew what Lori was saying was true. The reality of the situation had changed. The fight was no longer just about clean energy. It was about survival. Survival for his companies, for his vision, for humanity. But as he read Lori's message again, he realized something. He was at a crossroads. Could he really go back to the negotiating table with the very people he had rejected? Could he swallow his pride and compromise for the greater good, as Gwyn had suggested? The next morning, Elon found himself in his office at SpaceX once again, this time with JB and Gwyn present. The mood was somber, the weight of the decision pressing on all of them. "You're right," Elon said, pacing. "The world is not going to change just because I believe it should. The coalitions, the governments, they all have power. We can't ignore that. But," he paused, his mind racing, "I'm not willing to compromise on the vision. If we go back to them, it has to be on our terms, not theirs." JB looked at him, eyes narrowing. "So you're saying what? We take their money, their support, and then we push forward with Gaia as it was meant to be?" "Yes," Elon said firmly. "We negotiate with them, but we make it clear that the terms are non-negotiable. We will not let them control the vision. We will not let them dictate the future. If we bring them to the table, it has to be because they are ready to play by our rules. And if they're not, then we walk away again." Later that day, Elon and his team flew to Geneva, where the coalition's leaders had agreed to meet. This time, however, there would be no speeches about compromise or political games. Elon had learned enough over the years to understand that the only way to win was to make the opposition understand that they had no choice but to join him, or else be left behind. The meeting was intense, the room filled with the weight of history. Mara Devine was there again, as were several key political figures and financial backers. Elon didn't waste time with pleasantries. He got straight to the point. "I'm not here to negotiate my vision," Elon said, his voice firm. "Project Gaia is non-negotiable. The world doesn't need more promises. It needs action. And if you want to be part of that future, you need to commit to it without question." Mara met his gaze, her eyes narrowing. "And if we don't? Then you will be left behind," Elon said calmly, his words carrying an undeniable weight. "The world is moving forward, whether you're with us or not. Stand." Now, it was a matter of seeing who would back down first. The silence in the conference room was deafening. Every person at the table knew that what Elon had just said was more than a mere statement. It was a declaration of war. A war against the established order, against the very forces that had ruled the global economy for centuries. The giants of industry, the politicians who had long manipulated power for their own gain, now had a choice. Join Elon in his mission to change the future or be left behind in the wake of progress. Mara Devine, ever the tactician, was the first to speak, her voice measured but stern. "You talk as if the world will simply bend to your will, Elon. As if your vision is the only way forward. You're playing with forces that you can't control. And if you fail, it's not just your company that will collapse. It's the entire global economy." Elon didn't flinch. "I'm not trying to control the world. I'm trying to save it. You're right about one thing. The forces I'm up against are vast. But the truth is, those forces have already failed the planet. The economy as it stands is built on a foundation of short-term greed and environmental destruction. The system is unsustainable. So I'm not here to argue the details. I'm here to tell you that Project Gaia will happen, with or without you. The question is, will you be a part of it?" There was a moment of uneasy silence as the room processed Elon's words. The stakes were higher than they had ever been. For Mara and the others, it was no longer just about business. It was about power. Their power. The idea that one person, one vision, could threaten everything they had worked to build was unsettling. And yet, despite the looming threat, there was something undeniable about Elon's passion, his resolve. Mara cleared her throat and glanced at the others before looking back at Elon. "And how do you propose we join you, Elon? What exactly are you asking for?" Elon leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "I want you to commit to the vision of a sustainable future. I want you to use your resources, your political influence, and your business acumen to accelerate the adoption of renewable energy, not just as an alternative, but as the global standard. I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for an investment in the future. If we succeed, we all succeed. But if you're not willing to take that risk, then you'll be left on the sidelines watching the world move on without you." The room was still. Elon's challenge was clear, his conviction unwavering. But it wasn't just about money or business anymore. It was about something far greater, the future of humanity itself. It was Gwyn who broke the silence. "Elon's right. You've heard the reports, seen the science. We don't have decades to continue down the same destructive path. Climate change is accelerating, and the window for change is closing faster than anyone is willing to admit. This isn't just a business decision, it's a survival decision." Lori, always the pragmatist, added, "We've been working on this for years, and the technology is ready. We don't need your money to make it happen, but we do need your cooperation. Without the backing of global leaders and corporations, it will take much longer, and we won't have the resources to scale the way we need to. This is about saving the planet, your planet too." Mara looked around the table, her gaze lingering on the faces of the other coalition members. The tension was palpable. On one hand, they saw the writing on the wall. The global movement for sustainability was growing too fast to ignore. The transition to a clean energy future was inevitable. On the other hand, giving in to Elon's vision meant a loss of control. It meant relinquishing the power they had held for so long. Finally, Mara spoke, her voice quieter than before. You've made your point, Elon, and I'm not going to pretend this is an easy decision. But the truth is, we've already lost. The momentum behind your vision is too strong. You've won the battle for the future. So if we're going to survive as an industry, we need to adapt. We need to change. There was a long pause as Mara looked around at the others. Slowly, one by one, the others nodded in agreement. The power structures they had once controlled were crumbling, and the only way forward was to align themselves with the movement that had already begun. Elon allowed himself a small smile, though he remained composed. I'm glad to hear that, he said, his voice calm but resolute. But remember, this isn't a partnership of convenience. This is a partnership of conviction. I'm not interested in lip service. I'm interested in action. If you're truly committed to the future, you'll use every ounce of your influence to make it happen. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?